Okay, I am calling to order public meeting 239 of the Mass Gaming Commission on Thursday, March 29th, 10:30 a.m. at our offices in Boston. We will start as usual with the approval of the minutes, and I will ask the treasurer in training to try it again. I'm sorry, I did it again.
Secretary.
Secretary in training, sorry.
I'm still in training too.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I move the commission approve the minutes in the packet from the March 15th, 2018 meeting as they appear, subject to correction for typographical errors, other non-material matters.
Second.
What was the date you said?
15.
March 15th.
15th, right. Any discussion?
You know, I had a question, and I was trying to go in on page 5 of the minutes at around 12:30. There's a paragraph that reads that Council Stratton presented the progress of MGM on Elm Street, on the project in Elm Street. Was there a discussion at the time of drop dead date? Can someone remind me if that was part of the discussion?
I'd have to go back and look at the transcript to see if that took place at that time.
Okay. I'd like to do that, and if that was the case, maybe include it in the minutes, because that's a very significant time frame.
Okay,
from my
let me
perspective.
check on that.
Okay.
Anything else?
I had, Mr. Chairman, I had one note under the 1004 general update. Under number 1, it says construction commitments as well as transportation demand management commitments of Ombudsman Ziemba and Oversight Manager Joe Delaney. I don't think they're their commitments, but maybe as reported by, or kind of just missing a piece. And then on 1145, MGM was talking about their corner development, which is where the old Dave's Furniture store was. Maybe we can identify that as Union and Main, so people have a sense of where that is in the project.
Okay, we can do that.
Anything else? All in favor with those notations?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. I should have mentioned at the outset that there are only 4 commissioners here today, as Commissioner McDonald's replacement. Ms. Eileen O'Brien has not been, her term does not start until next week. She'll be joining us on Monday. All right, Director Bedrosian.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to opening day.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I'd expect a win this afternoon. A couple things I'd like to do today: introduce new staff first, tell you about a visit to Springfield Mr. Ziemba and I had, show you our critical path timeline to the MGM opening, and then finally just make a brief comment about today's agenda. So with that, I'd like to introduce new staff who've joined us probably since the last time I've introduced new staff, which actually turns out to have been too long. First, we have Cassandra Chung, who's a license verification coordinator. Cassandra, if you just raise your hand.
Yep, stand
There
up.
she is. Thank you.
Great.
Lisa Bruckner, who's a licensing intake officer. She started in January, and I should have said Cassandra started in November. Do we have, did Lisa? We got her? Yep.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Erica Lee Wiley, a paralegal in IEB, started in February. Erica, great, excellent. We have Catherine Muxie Hardigan, Enforcement Counsel, working with Ms. Lilio, started in March. Catherine, excellent. And finally, we have Lon Wen, who is a Human Resource Generalist, who will be working with Trupti and HR, and she started in March, as did Catherine. So welcome, everyone.
Great, welcome.
Welcome.
All right. So I do want to tell you about a visit Mr. Ziemba and I had to Springfield on Tuesday, John? Tuesday. We went out for Rising Springfield, which is an annual presentation that the mayor and Chief Development Officer Kevin Kennedy do that highlights what has been happening with economic development in Springfield. Interestingly, Commissioner Stebbins probably knows this, they measure their benchmark, their day zero is from when the tornado came through and did the damage in 2011. So from that point, there have been measuring economic development and investment in Springfield. And if you add up the investment of MGM, a new transportation center, the Chinese rail investment, expansion of Big Y, public works projects, school projects, healthcare projects, they're now anticipating they have $3.7 billion worth of investment in Springfield. The other very interesting number is that when all the development is mature, and I should also mention the Dr. Seuss Museum, which is the only one new in Springfield and apparently doing very well in visits. The other
And the railroad car company. too.
exactly, yeah,
For that.
exactly. The other interesting fact, and John will correct me if I got it wrong, they're anticipating, I think Kevin said 10 million annual visitors to Springfield. Yeah, 10 million annual visitors to Springfield. And I forget what you do. That's like Springfield itself visiting Springfield once a week or something. I didn't get that exactly right. I'm sure Kevin would say what it is.
Do you have any idea what that compares to? Is it 10 million, and what was it last year, for example?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it was an impressive number. So Secretary Ash was out there. It was a well-attended event. And certainly, people were very happy with the way in which Springfield's heading. And of course, they gave out these Springfield City of First bumper stickers. So I have a few, and they were free. So I can post those. So it was John, I don't know if you want to add anything about that visit.
No, I went last year, and it's what's pleasing is that the investment significantly increases every single year, and that's a trend that is going to be important not only for Springfield but also for the success of the MGM facility. So it's a trend we like, and we hope continues.
We had a meeting of the Gaming Policy Advisory Committee yesterday, and invited them to come out to
Right.
Springfield for our next meeting out there, April 26th. I think.
6th, correct.
And at least 2 of them are going to come out to see the product of our work, which will be great.
Right, exactly. So, the last issue before my comments is the critical path to MGM opening. It's formatted a little different than the critical path you saw that MGM presented, I think, at the last meeting. This one, you can tell by and I hope it shows up, the color code, which is the dark blue are things we've completed. The lighter blue are in progress, and the gray are to do. Not surprisingly, as you go through, and this is a year chart, Q4 2017 to Q3 2018, the end of which we are designating when the casino opens. Not surprisingly, you see the tasks get more as you go to the right, and you see, and we don't actually have an endpoint for the licensing, because we know both anecdotally and from experience of other folks that licensing continues well past opening. So that's an ongoing process. This was senior staff helped me put this together. And this is a high level, certainly not everything we have to do, but this is a high level. I feel comfortable that we have our hands around what needs to be done, and we're prepared for what needs to be done. But if you have any questions, and I'm not telling you these benchmarks are exactly to date, but they're in the appropriate quarter for sure.
Did we not vote on the MGM the final construction schedule?
So we had anticipated on doing that today, but we need a little more work to prepare that for the
Okay.
commission. It's likely at the next meeting.
Missed that by a few
Right.
days.
Right. So, and this obviously, represents a lot of work by staff who's doing all these. All I try and do is herd cats. So, any questions?
No.
Great, thank you. So I just do want to make a comment about today's agenda. You'll notice there are a number of items related to our Region A licensee, WinMass LLC, on today's agenda. And I just want to be clear about something. Our investigation on Win's license continued suitability is ongoing. Staff is working hard, some of whom are currently in Las Vegas. It's our hope to come to the commission with findings no later than summer. I'll caveat that right now. Having said that, investigations are complex and I cannot guarantee a concrete timeframe. In the meantime, we are cognizant that our licensee continues to build and prepare for opening of the Ever Casino. Today, you'll hear a quarterly report that is required by statute and regulations. You will also hear about plans for a gaming school and the start of the licensee's workforce development and diversity plan. In the long run, the gaming school and implementation of a workforce and diversity plan goals are contingent upon the outcome of investigation and potential action of this commission, which are in no way predetermined, and today's procedural discussions should not be interpreted as a prejudgment on the ongoing investigation. We as staff acknowledge this creates an awkward situation, but these matters for now must continue on parallel tracks. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bedrosian. I appreciate the fact that you and your staff are walking this fine line between proceeding as planned under the law and under our regs, even while other staff are investigating all of the relevant facts surrounding the allegations against Wynn and against Wynn Resorts, as well as investigating the behavior of the board and the senior management during the period of time covered in the allegations. I have said repeatedly that for now we must proceed with the Everett project as planned, and to be thoughtfully mindful of the thousands of people whose jobs may be affected by these issues, and of the long-term economic benefits envisioned by this project. But as a practical matter, as we draw and as you draw this fine line, Wynn Resorts is proceeding with this project on an at-risk basis. As you said, that is to imply no suggestion of an outcome to our investigation or to our deliberations subsequently, but it merely states clearly the reality of the present situation. We appreciate the complications for you and for you, but that's where we are at the moment.
So with that, I am done. Thank you.
I have a question for Director Bedrosian. Is there there's some reports about an investigation that's being conducted by internally by the company. Is there anything that you can comment about relative to that investigation?
Other than that, we are aware of that investigation, and so far, folks are being as cooperative as they can, we think, with the company.
Okay, so that is the end of the administrative update, and we are going to that included your timeline was the MGM update, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So there are several items that are effectively lumped together. Ombudsman Ziemba, item 4 will be the Wynn Boston quarterly report, and then with the same team at the table, our director of workforce and supplier and diversity development, Jill Griffin, will talk about the Wynn Boston workforce development plan and the gaming school update. So let's take those 3 in a row, starting with Ombudsman Ziemba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I will let Bob DeSalvio introduce his team for each of the various aspects of the presentations. After the quarterly report, which is the 4th quarter of 2017, ending December 31st of 2017, I will vacate my seat and have Jill join us up here. But I'll turn it over to Bob for the 4th quarterly report.
Thank you, John, and good morning, commissioners.
Morning.
I'd also like to start by introducing a new team member. Heather DeSanto is our new Vice President of Human Resources, joined the company just recently, and I'm going to let, as we move forward and get into the workforce development and diversity plan, Heather was prepared to tell you about herself and give you some background, which I think is very relevant. The other announcement I wanted, Peter Campo is out of town at the moment today, so I'll be handling the construction update along with Jackie for the first portion. And I did want to bring up, I know at a previous meeting we talked about getting a updated tour to the site. I know recently you've spent time out in Springfield, so I want to put that back on the table for staff and commissioners if available. But so much has gone on with the construction. I think we talked around June as maybe being a good time. When we get to June, we will have our first sample rooms ready to be viewed. And I think that would be a very important milestone as part of the process. So I'll leave that up to, I'll work together with the staff, see if we can organize and get some additional construction tours out as soon as possible.
Great.
As far as the update goes, I'll start with what I call the major milestones, and we've divided up our work into really 4 different updates for you. I'm here today again, joined with Jackie, and we're going to probably split this, Jackie Crum split this half and half. As far as the construction milestones on our site work, our marine work is, as you can see, it's mentioned, it's 96% complete. We're just about done. That project has gone quite well. It was difficult during the winter, as you can imagine, with some of those storms that came in, but the contractor has done a really good job, and they're just about wrapping it up, as is our site utility work, nearly complete. The EPS block, that is a fancy term for the block that goes underneath the main roadways in and out of the site. We then, obviously, we then cap that and put pavement above it, but that's an important part of the component. It relates to the elevation of the facility and our goal to address future sea level rise and getting the access road. As you recall, we got our access road up about 13 feet above mean sea level, and the base level of the podium, and including the casino floor, is up about 25 feet above mean sea level. So in order to build those roads up, you've got to put a very significant sort of block system that allows us to build the roads on top of it. I also wanted to report on the site issues that we have already experienced. You know, there were obviously 4 nor'easters that hit. The first 2 were extremely significant, and the first one, which was right after New Year's, was the worst because it came at the very high astronomical tides. During that storm, it was the highest recorded tides ever out by Logan and in Boston Harbor. So it was a great test for us. It was the equivalent of a 100-year flood mark. But I can report that the water did not crest our new bulkhead, and the water came up on the living shoreline and receded back. We had no damage on the site whatsoever, and the 4-story garage below the building had not a drop of water in it. So in a sense, I actually feel very good with those passing of those first 2 storms. It was a tremendous test on our plans for resiliency and sustainability, and I think we did really well during those first 2 tests. Always nice to get those tests done before opening. So really good news there. Plant selection and purchasing. We have already selected all of the species that are going to be on site. And as a matter of fact, you will see work in April. We're going to start with the hardscape and the planting out on the site. So it's going to start looking more like a completed site. As far as the garage goes, as I mentioned, the structure is 100% complete. We're currently working on fire protection, erection, and masonry, about 75%. The mechanical, electrical, and plumbing is about halfway done, along with the spray insulation for fireproofing and the painting of the garage. But it looks really good on the garage. On our next slide, we're talking about the Podium North, and that's what we refer to as the central utility plant. That's the northernmost portion of the facility. We are just about done with all the plumbing, electrical, fire protection, drywall, ceilings, and we're now working on flooring. So looking really good there. The podium, which contains the gaming portion of the podium, the ceiling framing, I'm going to show you some slides shortly. We're about 80% complete. The wall framing about 90% complete, drywall about 15%. So we're starting to work our way around as we continue to do the inspections with the local officials in Everett. As far as the podium on the convention side of the space, we're about 70% done with the wall framing, 30% with plumbing, 20% with electrical. The tower is going extremely well. Curtain wall is up to 16. The concrete is up to level 25 and has now become very, very evident as you travel on 93, for example. You can see that tower really sits nicely on the horizon. The golden rooms, which are our sample rooms, are about 15% complete, and I mentioned those should be done in June, hopefully timed with maybe your next visit. And then drywall, we've started up to level 11 on the tower. The next slide shows you some really good progress. You can see the curtain wall system going up on the tower. You can see out front in the foreground the structure for the porte-cochere. You can see already to the right of the porte-cochere, you see some trucks on what will be our future access road, and that access road has already been supported by the EPS blocking and some grading and some temporary pavement that's down there to create access for us. So all looking good there. The next slide shows you the convention space in the foreground, leading back to the main podium. And
Excuse me, when were these taken?
these are within probably the last week or so. Yeah, last snowstorm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these are very current. You can see here again the convention space, the podium, and the tower, and then you can see in the towards the back that is the central utility plant section of the building. We will have that central utility plant up and running this summer because we need to start conditioning the space in order to put in the final finishes inside the building. This is a shot, the next shot that shows the tower from right at the base of the convention area, and to the right of that would be the location of the Harbor Walk. The next slide shows you this is the interior of the main lobby area inside the front doors, and the curved wooden structures are going to wind up housing the ficus trees in the center of the lobby with the skylit area. So it's a beautiful space. That's going to be very welcoming as people come in through the porte-cochere. The next shot shows you how advanced we are on the casino floor. You can see that we're putting finished ceilings in, and you can see we're marching around the perimeter doing the framing and starting of the drywall. You can see also the MEP already up in the ceiling. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago with the SSI who's doing the surveillance system. So all of those systems are going in as well. And so we're pretty far advanced in terms of the casino floor. The next slide, this shows you a shot on the casino floor facing east, and you're looking basically underneath what is the elevated poker room above the main casino floor. And again, that gives you a good shot of how far advanced the MEP systems are on the casino floor. And then the next shot is kind of an overview. So this would be if you are looking north from on top of the poker room area and looking across to the elevated side on the other side, which houses the high limit gaming area, and out towards the main lobby and arrival part of the buildings. And again, you can see here how advanced the ceilings are inside the facility. The next slide shows you the curved escalators that are part of the lobby. That was a very interesting installation. As you can imagine, the detail work that has to go on when you're installing something as complicated as curved escalators took quite a bit of time, but that project is nearly complete, and we'll get ready to do the finish work on those escalators. The next slide shows you an overview, and nice to see the harbor cleaned up. I will tell you that project was really interesting in terms of putting in the new fill. You know, we did two things. We did a navigational dredge so that we'd be able to get the water shuttles up to the front of the facility, but we also did a remedial dredge to take out any of the contaminants that had leached from the main site and were now on the bottom of the harbor bed. So that the contaminated soil was removed, and then we put in a new 18-inch cap of clean sandy material. And what's amazing is when we pulled out the old contaminated dirt and soil that was there, you put in the new sand, it actually changed the coloration of the water. So I promise you these were not touched up. This is really great news and we're starting to see a lot more wildlife now coming into the harbor ever since the work of the living shoreline and that remediation work is drawing to a close. Also, you'll notice on this slide, we're advancing the finish of the roof. above the convention space. You can see they're about 3/4 to 7/8 done with that. And then we'll be also adding the solar panels at a later date. We have a large section of our roofing will have solar panels on it. We have green roofs. As you remember, we are LEED Gold. And again, sustainability was front and center, as we think about our cogen and all the things that we did in order to make this building environmentally sound. As far as a project schedule goes, I am not going to take you through the next 3 slides. So let me give you the highlights. We are currently on time. We had put into the job 23 days worth of bad weather. We've probably used about 13 of those days through the first 2 winters. So we have a few left, except next year, very little work will have to be done outside of the building. So I'm not anticipating that we're going to have significant weather delays going into the final winter that we have to deal with. So we're very good from a scheduling perspective. The milestones coming up shortly are that we will finish the concrete superstructure about the 3rd week in April in the building. So that will mean that we've reached the 27th floor. We will, in May, we will finish up the steel superstructure at the top of the building. In July, we will finish up the curtain wall system, so you will see it totally enclosed in glass. And in August, we will probably begin really taking down the tower cranes. And then the tower at that point will look almost complete to the eye. So really, really good progress. And again, I have to compliment, I really got to throw out some kudos here. First of all, the WIN Design Development Team, which is led by John Littell and of course Peter Campo and Chris Gordon, who's working on the offsite infrastructure improvements. Our team has done an amazing job, and really a lot of kudos to Suffolk Construction. John Fish, obviously leading the charge. Rich Michaels, who's really very, very strong in terms of on-site management, and Jeff Weatherford. Between the Suffolk team and our team, they've really collaborated quite well. I want to move next to the off-site infrastructure improvements. As you know, the work that we are doing outside of the building and the gaming establishment are just as important to the project as the work inside of the building. Just to refresh everyone's memory, the main work that we're doing includes Wellington Circle, it includes Sullivan Square, Santilli, Sweetser, and of course, we're rebuilding all of Lower Broadway. That work, we divided up into 4 packages, and we've assigned them to really 3 different companies. SPS has the Broadway project. Jay Dorenzo got Route 16, which is the Mystic Valley Parkway, and then DW White got the MBTA station improvements in Sullivan Square. All of those projects are underway. We've had excellent working relationships with the Boston Transportation Department for the work the very critical work we have to do in Sullivan Square. And we just had a really good meeting with the new general manager of the MBTA. Luis has really done, I thought, a great job in his first 4 months navigating those the storms that we recently had. And his team has been working tremendously with us in terms of getting improvements done to Sullivan Square. So right now, as far as the roadway goes, we are all systems go, and we're trying to get all of that work completed during this calendar year. Some of the work may slip into early 2019, but the goal is to get it done long before the casino would open.
Robert, on that item number 2, it says you talk about the MBTA station improvements, and you say parking lot improvements at
Sullivan
where?
Square.
Okay.
There's going to be actually a project this summer. We're working this out with the MBTA. We want to try to basically do a complete resurfacing of the lot in Sullivan Square, and we want to try to do that timed with the lowest possible commuter traffic. So we're looking to hit that August kind of vacation window, because it will require shutting down at some point, that section, and doing some work. We've got to do new bus enclosures, some road work in and around Sullivan Square, and we're trying to time that so we do it when you have the least amount of traffic going through the station. But some really good improvements for pedestrian access, ADA access, a new routing system for the buses, all designed with improvements in mind for not only the station, but the area surrounding the station.
Thank you.
At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie for the project diversity update.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Good morning.
So the first, as you know, our design phase of the project is largely completed. At least we hope it's largely completed. And so our goal for MBE contracts was 7.9%. We have achieved 9%. For WBE contracts, 10%, and we achieved 7%. For VBE contracts, our goal was 1%, and we achieved 6.6%. For total contracts, our goal was 18.9, and we achieved 22.6%. For contracts awarded to minority, women, and veteran business enterprises for the construction phase, we had a goal of 5% for MBE, and we achieved 5.6 to date. Actually, these numbers are through December 31st, 2017.
This is to date, there's a long ways to go, or
Correct.
Correct.
For women business enterprises, our goal was 5.4%, and we've achieved 9.6. For veteran business enterprises, our goal was 1%, and we've achieved 2.6. And the total number of contracts, our goal was 11.4%, and we've achieved 16.3%. In terms of the workforce participation during the construction phase, we had a goal for minority of 15.3%, and we're currently at 25.5%. For women, 6.9 was our goal, and we're at 7.1. That's largely thanks to the work of Jenny Peterson sitting down table for me. And veterans, our goal was 3%, and we are at 6.8%. Just briefly, our outreach efforts during the last quarter of 2017. We've obviously got a lot of events listed, but I just want to highlight two. We had the ribbon cutting for a scholar athletes, what they called the Zone at Everett High School. It's a dedicated place in the high school where students can come before, during, or after school to receive tutoring, assistance on college applications, and they're guided by athletes, staff, student athletes, staff, and volunteers. And the second item I wanted to talk about is the Building Pathways Pre-Apprenticeship Program. During the last quarter, we invited, and there's some photos of this, Jenny, if you just want to skip ahead. We invited some of the participants in this program, which is a gateway for Boston area residents, particularly in underserved communities, to access careers in the construction industry. So we had an event at the site where they could learn about the different trades. Okay. That concludes our presentation.
Jackie, these are good as they always are. John and Jill Griffin, slides 24 through 27 would be great to send out to the GFAC.
Okay.
Because that came up at the meeting yesterday, and we didn't quite have the numbers at our fingertips, but those 3 slides would be great to send.
So, got any
Any
questions?
Any questions on the construction and quarterly update?
Yeah, I do have a question. You have reported prior that this project had been financed in full from early in the project. Since then, there has been a major settlement with the Okada litigation and a number of other financing deals. Does any of that affect the current state of the financing for this project?
None whatsoever.
No, in fact, the reason they did a lot of those financing arrangements was to make sure that this project was fully funded and no resources that were previously devoted to this project were used for that purpose.
Anybody else?
No, we should note that we're not taking questions, Mr. Chairman.
Out in the audience?
Out in the
Oh,
audience.
sorry. No, I meant from the commissioners. I didn't see the hand. I'm very sorry.
Just one note on the female construction workers. And I know Jenny does a great job working with our AOC team, but maybe on our next AOC meeting, we can do a little more deep dive on some of those numbers, what the projection is for some of the trades you're gonna be using coming
Right.
up.
And,
Great.
as you know, at this point in our construction phase, it's been more difficult to get female workers onto the site, and we're hoping as we move into the building that those numbers will increase.
Thank you.
I didn't see a hand going up, but we do, if anybody did want to comment or ask a question, we do have a place on our website, MGC Comments, which all commissioners read all entries on and which will generate a response if it's appropriate. And if it was a press hand up, I believe the WIN people will be available when we're finished with section 5 on the agenda. So, and we'll be taking a break where press could ask questions at that point if you all are willing. Okay, so that's it, Ombudsman Ziemba, for that portion.
That's it.
Okay. So Director Griffin.
Good.
Good morning, Commissioners. By
I'm
way
sorry.
of-
sorry. Jill's gonna-
Oh, sorry, that's fine.
She's the new one.
Yes. I'll just set a little context.
We need the microphone.
Oh, there it is. Good morning, Chairman Crosby and Commissioners.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm here to introduce the Wynn Boston Harbor Workforce Development and Diversity Plan. And I'll provide some background and context before I turn the agenda over to our guests. For background, as part of the effort to ensure that Massachusetts residents benefit from the operational jobs created by casino development in Massachusetts, the legislature established requirements in the Expanded Gaming Act that our licensees must produce for commission approval an affirmative action program for equal opportunity. As referenced by sections 18 and 21 of Chapter 23K and the Massachusetts Gaming Commission agreement to award a Category 1 license to Wynn, the affirmative action program must describe how the licensee will identify and market employment opportunities to the under and unemployed residents of the Commonwealth, and to work with the Massachusetts Department of Labor and Workforce Development and related state and local agencies to create this program. Additionally, in the Category 1 gaming license to Wynn, Mass, Condition 14 requires the provision of a plan within 90 days of the Commission's request. Wynn has satisfied this Commission with this plan submission to you today, well before the late April deadline. The license condition also requires a robust public outreach component to identify and market employment opportunities to unemployed residents of Massachusetts. It specifies that the workforce development plan must incorporate an action program of equal opportunity that guarantees to provide equal employment opportunities to all employees qualified for licensure, including persons with disabilities, utilizing existing labor force in the Commonwealth. And they must identify workforce training programs offered by the gaming establishment and methods for assessing employment at the gaming establishment. The Gaming Act called out the following priorities for inclusion of the plan: establishing funding and maintaining human resource hiring, access to promotional opportunities, transparent career paths with measurable criteria that lead to increased responsibility and higher pay grades, employee access to additional resources, including tuition reimbursement and stipends to enable employees to acquire these advancement opportunities. Finally, an important priority in the gaming law is equity and inclusion. As part of this process, all gaming licensees are required to set diversity hiring goals. and submit strategic plans for the inclusion of minorities, women, and veterans in the workforce. The submission of the Wynn Boston Harbor Workforce Development and Diversity Plan is intended to satisfy all these requirements. With that background, let me remind you that no vote on this plan is expected today. In fact, this is the beginning of a lengthy and transparent process to publicly vet the plan. As with our other licensees, the Commission will post this plan for public comment and broadly distribute the plan and suggest potential revisions to our licensee. As we have in the past, we will distribute the plan to the Governor's Skills Cabinet senior staff for feedback, community colleges, gaming school partners, regional employment boards, career centers, and other stakeholder groups, including the community. I know that Wynn has also been seeking feedback from their community partners as well. So I estimate we would bring the plan back to you for a vote in early to mid-May. Unless you have questions, I'll turn the mic back over to our licensees.
Anybody? Okay, now, give it a shot.
Again, good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I'm Heather DeSanto, Vice President of Human Resources. And by way of background, I have nearly 20 years HR experience. I was actually born and raised in California. I spent over 10 years in Las Vegas, and most recently 8 years overseas in Singapore. I've worked for large-scale hotels, casinos the entire time. And, I'd like to say that I'm a perfect example of the hospitality industry creating career paths for individuals. I started off as an assistant to the Vice President of Human Resources and worked my way up over the past 15, 20 years. So with that, thank you again for
Just
your
let me,
time.
where were you
Yes.
working in Singapore?
I was working at Marina Bay Sands.
And how did you happen to come from Singapore to Boston?
I was actually working for the Venetian and the Palazzo in Las Vegas, and there was a transfer opportunity. So I was part of the pre-opening team, and I actually worked closely with the Casino Regulatory Authority of Singapore because we have thousands of licensed employees in Singapore.
Good.
Great, thank you. All right. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn over the first part of the Workforce Development and Diversity Plan to Jenny Peterson, our Director of Employment. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's really great to be here to present, as Jill mentioned, kind of the first draft and iteration of our Workforce Development and Diversity Plan. To start off, I'd like to kind of share the 4 overarching objectives that guided this plan, and what we'll talk about is a lot of the tactics and strategies that are behind each of these objectives. So first, we know we need to raise awareness, let the community, the local and diverse community, know who we are as an employer, what these opportunities are, how they can prepare, and how they can eventually apply for and access our careers. Our second objective is to prepare career seekers. We're very fortunate that we are over a year away from opening, so people have some time to get ready, to explore the jobs, to get some additional training and education if it's needed, and really be in a great place to come work with us when the hiring begins. Third, to recruit and hire a qualified, local, and diverse workforce. We know that hiring the right people from the very beginning is absolutely critical to our success. And finally, once we have people on board, we want to develop and retain them, create a place where they can grow and learn and advance in their careers, just as Heather has done, and as I've been very fortunate to grow with the company the last 4 years. High-level timeline for these objectives, I think that's helpful for understanding where we are in the process. Raising awareness. We've been talking about these careers since I started with Wynn 4 years ago. So we've been out there getting the word out. Really, that effort to raise awareness will pick up even more this year as we prepare for the mass hiring early next year. Preparing career seekers. We're building relationships with local educational partners now, and in May we will be launching SkillSmart, which I know you're familiar with. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but that will kind of launch that part of the workforce development plan. Recruiting and hiring, already underway in a small way. We're slowly adding people to our team, and that will really start to pick up the end of this year and early next year with the mass hiring. And finally, develop and retain, again, already underway, but a lot of that work will come into full swing early next year as many more team members join us. So moving on to raising awareness, I'd like to kind of recap some of our commitments. Our first commitment and preference for hiring is to our host community of Everett. And we have made additional commitments to our surrounding communities, our neighboring communities, Suffolk Downs employees, and as is noted in our license, communities that fall within 30 minutes of Everett. So our outreach and recruitment efforts will focus in these communities. And we'll get to our specific diversity goals.
Is there a, you don't have in your host community agreement even a best efforts target number, do you, or do you?
We do not. It is a preference. So first preference for Everett residents.
Right.
But you do point out that you plan to hold hiring events in each of those communities.
Yes.
As part of the host and surrounding community events.
And we've, as we're talking about all these things like outreach, career fairs, branding, all of those things are really going to be focused in our host and surrounding communities and among diverse populations within those communities. So we'll keep reiterating that as we go along, but just wanted to put that out there. Before we get to our diversity goals, I wanted to provide a little bit of context on how we thought about these goals and how we thought about what the right goals would be. We looked first at the map and saw, okay, we're based here in Everett, and we know we'd like to hire first and foremost from our host and surrounding communities. We have 4,500 individuals to bring on board, which is a very large number. We're in a environment of low unemployment, and we have a lot of skills we're looking for. So it made sense to us that in addition to our immediate communities, we would be looking a bit outside. So we kind of looked on the map and put this 35-mile radius in place. So we've reviewed demographics based on kind of this catchment area, if you will, and have sought to set diversity goals that are reflective of the demographics in this region.
Jenny, can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
Can you go back to the slide previous to the radius map? 75, and again, we can kind of address this. This is really our first look at it, but you talk about 75% of the team within 30 minutes of Everett. Obviously, that 30 minutes can depend on the time of day and whether you're trying to get through Sullivan Square or not. But so you have that, you buttress it with the 35-mile radius. So as we kind of move through this discussion process and we kind of give some clarity to that 75%.
Yes, so it's interesting you brought that up. We've had that same conversation internally. The 30 minutes, this is actually language directly from our license, so we wanted to honor that, but there's, we're very well aware that the 30 minutes can be a huge range in terms of miles. So we'll be working internally to look at exactly what that means and where we're drawing that 75% boundary. But again, I would just come back to, it's first and foremost focusing on the population within the host and surrounding communities.
Okay. Thank you.
So just the, demographic data, we wanted to look at what the unemployment rates are, and then what the demographics look like in the counties that fall within this 35-mile radius, the counties that encompass our host, surrounding, and neighboring communities, and what the demographics of our host and surrounding communities look like. So low unemployment rate across the board, about a 28.4% minorities in the counties within 35 miles, around 35% when you look at counties that encompass our host, surrounding, and neighboring communities. And then, of course, our host and surrounding communities themselves, very diverse, 48.8% minority. We look at these numbers, and we also layer on top of that the number of applicants we would expect to receive to get to our 4,500 employees. We have several people on our team who have done these big openings before, and based on their experiences, we think we could be seeing, 80,000, maybe even more applications to get to those 4,500 positions. Looking at veterans, so 5.7% of the population has a veteran status, and a bit less than half of that are veterans of more recent conflicts that are active in the workforce. Before I dive in and talk about these specific goals, I thought it's helpful to talk about how we think more generally about diversity as a company and why it's important to our business. We will be hosting guests from all over the world, people from different cultures who speak different languages, and bring different ideas to our property. And having a workforce that reflects the diverse cultures and languages and ideas that our guests will bring is critical for us to create the best possible experience for our guests. So regardless of what the numbers are, that is what is really driving us, is creating a workforce that can create that experience. So we've
Can I make a comment, Jenny?
Yep.
I see all your numbers and your goals. The one thing I haven't heard, and I think it's really important, is diversity at all levels. To see those numbers, where you are at the very top, executive leadership, as well as throughout the organization, for two reasons. One is folks at the lower level can look and see others that look like them and aspire to that. And frankly, a company that is diverse at the top makes much better decisions. So I just think in all of your planning, that's something we will be looking at as well.
Absolutely, and we've been looking at that internally, and we certainly want to make, we want to ensure that we are diverse across the organization, across departments, and across levels within the organization, and create opportunities for people to grow into those roles. So we've set the following goals: 50% for women, minorities 35%, which we feel is reflective of our broader community, and also reflects the preference that we have for our host and surrounding communities, and a 3% goal for veterans.
Jenny, the 3% goal for veterans, the previous slide, obviously, I'm making some assumptions here. Some of those folks might not be interested in being part of the workforce at their age, but what was the number that you used to extract the 3%? Because you do say it's reflecting the portion of veterans in the Commonwealth who are in the workforce.
We looked
And it's
at,
a question you can come back to us with.
Sure, yeah, we looked at this 5.7% and thought, okay, if we took half of that, and also reflected the fact that we see the incredible skill sets that veterans bring. So that will be a target demographic for us in terms of folks that would come and join our workforce. They've got incredible skill sets that can be from their time in service that can be used across the organization. So probably the 3% is a little bit, potentially a little bit more than what we would see of veterans in the population that are looking, but I think that's reflective of our commitment.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, sir, we don't take comments spontaneously in our session. Thank you.
I won't go into detail on the next two slides, but one of the key parts of raising awareness is letting people know what all of these opportunities are. We've been talking about these, over 4,000 jobs for years now, so getting into some of the details, and this just provides a high-level overview by department. In bold are positions where we will be hiring 10 or more individuals, and bold with a star indicates over 100 individuals. So it gives you a sense for the breadth of the opportunities. Timeline, also a critical.
One sec, Jen, just to reiterate, I think, these slides too would be useful to send out to the GPAC. Not necessarily all the raising awareness stuff, but these data points.
We want to get this information out there. Timeline, also really important. I think for helping people understand when the positions will be available so they can plan their careers and their education and any skills training they'd like to do. So this gives a month-by-month snapshot, June of this year through opening. As you can see, we'll be adding about 100 individuals to our team through the end of this year, and then the mass hiring really begins early next year. I won't highlight everything in the outreach section, but I did want to touch on a few of the high points. One is our talent network. You've probably heard about this if you've been to any of our community outreach events or job fairs. This is a great platform we've had in place for over 3 years. And it's a very quick way for interested candidates to get their information to us. They just put in name, email address, and a zip code and what they're interested in, and they're automatically notified when we have new positions posted. And I checked the numbers and have been amazed to see that over the last 4 years in the WIN Boston Harbor Talent Network, we have close to 8,500 people who have signed up as the result of us getting the word out about this. So we've already got a great base of individuals that are interested in us. So while we'll certainly have digital and online tools for streamlining the application process, we realize that nothing can replace in-person, community-based support. And we've sought to create a network of community-based locations where individuals can receive support for navigating all of our online tools, getting general information, getting advice. It's really started with the career centers, which serve the unemployed and underemployed individuals, as well as people who are fully employed and might be looking for something new. We've been working with the career centers for the last 3 or 4 years. We started working with them on the construction jobs and helping people access the union so we could have a local and diverse workforce on our construction site. And now that relationship has evolved to the discussion is now about our operations jobs. So the career centers and then local community-based organizations that also have a physical place and provide career support. Again, we want to create as broad a network as possible. In addition to the community partners, we will have our own physical locations where people can come and get support. We'll have the WIN Boston Harbor Career Center located in Medford at our office, so that's accessible by the Orange Line, plenty of parking. And we'll also be opening a satellite career center at Everett City Hall. So we'll be there a few days a week. We think that's a great place for people to come and visit us. We will be, in terms of the community hubs that we'll be working with, we will provide their staff training and materials and make sure that they know how to answer questions about jobs, they know how to use our online tools and help their community members use those tools. A bit about outreach. Career fairs, this is something we've been doing. We've got 2 different career fairs going on this afternoon. One is the El Mundo Latino Career Fair, and the other one will be at Roxbury Community College at their Spring Career Day. So we'll continue to partner with community organizations and schools on their career fairs, and we'll be hosting our own career fairs when we get closer to the mass hiring. Update meetings with community leadership. I'll talk about this in just a minute, but we certainly know the importance of working with our community partners to engage with the local and diverse workforce. And then social and traditional media. We'll be launching a campaign dedicated to the careers and the employment opportunities, with the objective of ensuring that local people, diverse populations, the unemployed and underemployed, know about us, know what these careers are, and know how to access them and how to prepare. And there will be a focus on making that media campaign multilingual so that it's accessible to as many people as possible. So community leadership update meetings. This is something that has kind of grown organically over the last few years, and we've now formalized. We had some community leaders that, for example, the career centers, we had sort of set up regular check-in meetings with them where we would gather representatives from all of the career centers and other local organizations that help people get jobs. And we'd initially been talking about construction careers and decided to evolve that into a more formalized regular quarterly meetings where we bring leaders from the community together for a small group discussion, answer questions about the jobs, train them on our tools, and give them what they need to help get the word out within their communities. So we've got 5 of these regular update meetings up and running. Hispanic community led by the Hispanic American Institute. The Urban League is our supporter and convener for updates within the Black and African American community. Asian American Civic Association and James Chan for the Asian community, and the Metro North Regional Employment Board for the local community career advisors. As an aside, WIN has become a formal member of the Metro North Regional Employment Board, so we are an employer representing the hospitality industry, and that's been a great partnership for us to be a part of. And finally, the veteran community is convened by the DAV and the Director of Veteran Services for the City of Everett. And just, again, the purpose is to inform these leaders and also to set up, referral pipelines. We've had several instances where we've had these update meetings and we've said, hey, we're looking for PC techs or recruiters, and we've received referrals, and that's resulted in some successes. All right, so our second objective, to prepare career seekers. One thing we're really excited about is putting the SkillSmart web platform in place. I won't go into too much detail because I know you know about this from out in Springfield. We're really excited to get SkillSmart up and running. That'll be a way for career seekers to explore all of our positions, look at the skills needed for those positions, and connect with educational resources. We're working with SkillSmart now and look to have that launched this May. We know that we're bringing a new skill set to Eastern Massachusetts with table games positions and surveillance and a lot of the roles within the casino. We'll be forming a partnership with Cambridge College to run the Greater Boston Gaming Career Institute. They'll be speaking after this. I'll let them talk about that. But I did want to mention that we will be fully funding 50 scholarships for the Gaming Career Institute to help individuals prepare for careers with us. These opportunities will focus on individuals that are unemployed and underemployed, and will provide opportunities for residents of Everett, the surrounding communities, veterans, minorities, women, all individuals who are in need of financial support to complete these classes and apply for a job with us. We're here in a region with absolutely incredible educational resources, and this slide is just a snapshot of a few of the educational partners that we're working with. Of course, the community colleges and some of the local schools that have strong hospitality programs, and then other more specific training resources. I want to iterate that this is not a exhaustive list. This is a very preliminary list. There are a lot more educational partners that we are working with and will work with. And in our next version of the plan, we will be providing a more complete list of all of those resources. All right, so moving on to recruiting and hiring. There's a lot that goes into how we actually get resumes and make selections, and wanted to touch on a few of the highlights. First, our applicant tracking system. This is really a way for us to manage the massive volume that will be of applications that we'll be receiving to fill 4,500 positions allows us to quickly follow up with candidates and ensure that they have a great experience, and also allows us to track the demographics of who is applying for our jobs. So we'll be able to see if for some reason in certain positions we are not getting local or diverse candidates, and we'll be able to remedy the situation. Inclusive job descriptions and job requirements. We recently went through an exercise to create job descriptions for all of our positions, so over 450 job descriptions, and we took a close look at each of those and made sure that we weren't putting in place any requirements that weren't absolutely necessary. So in many cases, removed requirements for a bachelor's degree, and for several of our positions, removed the requirement for a high school degree or equivalent GED. We want to make sure that individuals have a chance to join us. And once they do, Heather will talk a little bit more about this, but we'll actually allow people to access GED training if they join us without that and want to be able to advance. Career fairs, we talked about. Panel interviews. This is a way for us to meet and interview a lot of people at once. So if we are hiring for cooks or servers, it just basically gives people a chance in a group setting to come in and meet the hiring manager and have a quick interview, which we think is important for getting as many applicants as possible some form of interview with us so they can meet us. And finally, training for our hiring managers. We have trained all of our hiring managers in behavioral interviewing, which helps our hiring managers refine their skills and how to talk with candidates, get kind of situation-based responses, and also see where skills and experiences might match up in a way that wouldn't be obvious on a resume, and you might not be able to pull out in a more traditional way. We're also going to ensure that we have diversity and inclusion training for all of our hiring managers and anyone who will be interviewing.
Jenny, is there Is there a component of onboarding in the recruitment and hiring phase? Obviously, we know when the industry turnover is big in the first year. What point is the onboarding, get used to the position, the hours, et cetera, take place? Is that in the recruit and hire phase?
That's part of, we might call it recruit and hire, and bleeds over into develop and retain.
Okay.
So we have a formal onboarding process right now. Actually, everybody is going out to Las Vegas so they can see what the property is and what it is that they're going to be a part of building. And we'll be transitioning that here as soon as we have more spaces available in our own building. But certainly, kind of just the general orientation and onboarding, and then ensuring that people have an excellent first week, first month. They get the training they need, the mentorship they need to stick with us.
It's actually a formalized 2-day orientation program that happens in Las Vegas, and it will replicate here, where every new hire goes through it, and they go through the entire building. They learn about the entire building. They learn about all the different departments, as well as some training and other components too.
Thank you.
We can include more information on that. Thank you. We'll turn it over to Heather.
Okay, great. So objective 4 is to develop and retain our team members. As part of Wynn Boston Harbor's employee value proposition, which is really what's in it for the candidate, for the employee, we want to ensure that we create an environment where they can progress professionally, and we want them to thrive. We want to take both a comprehensive and proactive approach in developing and retaining our team members. We will have pulse surveys, team member engagement surveys. We'll probably even have an onboarding survey to measure the onboarding process. But we want to make sure that we have a competitive pay and benefits package, as well as opportunities for career advancement. And we want to extend the same level of service to our team members that we extend to our guests. So with that, as part of our comprehensive pay and benefits package, we have 6 weeks of paid paternal leave. This is something that was announced fairly new. We have tuition reimbursement. We'll have negotiated child care discounts with convenient access. We hope to remove some of the barriers for single parents, working parents, individuals who work shifts, so that they can work full-time and seek the child care services they require. We'll focus on preventive care, on-site screening, wellness programs. The employee dining room will have healthy options for food, so we can ensure our team members are taking good care of themselves with regard to meal selection. So these are just examples. Of course, we have the medical, the dental, vision, prescription drug, all the other core benefits that come with the package. In addition to benefits and compensation, career pathways are very important. It's important that we be transparent with our team members. We believe that if they have the right attitude, the right aptitude, that they can be trained in any position or role that they desire, so long as they're really passionate about what it is that they do. One thing that I'm very proud of is that we'll have a training manager in every operational department. This is so the employees, the team members, can receive on-the-job training and help them accelerate their career path. So when you look at the slide on career pathways, table games, you can join as a dealer, and depending on your performance, depending on your skill set, you can progress fairly quickly through shift manager, manager, director. I'd like to think of this as an accelerated career path. Typically, you would find that directors of table games have 15 years or more experience. So, through all our training and on the job training and mentorship, we can accelerate these career pathways for team members. Another example is in food and beverage. We have an example within culinary, where you can join as a cook, and within 8 to 10 years, again, depending on your performance, you could be an executive chef. So these are opportunities, just a few of hundreds of opportunities that exist within the integrated resort. Examples I've seen are starting off in legal and moving to table games and slots. So it's not just about career pathways within one function or field or department. You can join, HR, and you can move over to legal or compliance. You can move over to slots or table games. So these are just examples of the opportunities that exist. As I mentioned, training and education, will be offering a wide array of training and on-the-job education. And we have several courses, programs. The ones to point out, we have a citizenship program where currently in Las Vegas we're offering 5 classes to team members at no cost. We prepare them for the U.S. naturalization process and citizenship test. They are eligible to receive a check at the end of the completion of those courses to help with the application fees. And as you can see by the list, we have performance management, change management, active listening, and I'm happy to share that we actually have someone joining us from the company as a transfer, who's worked for WIN for many years. He'll be our Director of Learning and Advancement, so he'll be joining in May. His name is Martin. All right, another very unique program to WIN is the storytelling program, and it celebrates and recognizes on a daily basis the successes of our team members. We have what's called pre-shift briefings, so before the shift starts, the managers will gather the team members together and they will share stories or examples of exceptional guest service. And the reason it's so successful is it is about peer recognition. So it might be that I witnessed something that Jenny had done, or someone else in a different department. It's about public recognition, so it really improves or boosts morale, team member engagement. And the story here is about Javier. He is working in a food and beverage outlet. The guest says, I have sore feet, my feet are tired. He reaches out to his manager and arranges for slippers to to be brought to the guest. So this story was shared publicly at all the pre-shift briefings across the entire resort in Las Vegas. And the second story is really about a team member providing exceptional service to another team member. Someone, I believe it was in employee relations, had a malfunction with her uniform and required a safety pin. So the seamstress or the uniform control manager went above and beyond and actually fixed the uniform for her rather than just using a safety clip. So this is really at the core of the Win culture, and we look forward to bringing this to Win Boston Harbor. I will say in closing that we very much look forward to hiring, over 4,000 individuals. And we do recognize that the success of Win Boston Harbor depends on hiring a local and diverse workforce. And we realize that they'll bring to the table a broad range of talent. And we want to offer, again, that exceptional service to not only our guests, but to our team members. We want to be an employer of choice. So I'd like to thank our many community partners, our educators, the government agencies, and of course the commission, and we look forward to working together. Thank you.
This is stating the obvious, but since it maybe isn't as obvious since you didn't state it, but I would think that in this kind of material, you would want to make sexual harassment training and a bulletproof complaint processing plan a major part of your presentation. For reasons presumably not having anything to do with you, the Win culture you're referring to has some shadows cast on it. And I would think that would be something that's very important for you to push proactively, boldly, honestly, and aggressively.
Yes, actually Jackie and I are working on that, and the company does offer compliance training, sexual harassment training, harassment in general, and we'll look at not only policies, procedures, but also the ethics hotline, as well as team member handbook, et cetera. So it will be embedded within the organization.
And as you can appreciate, at this current time, we're going through an extensive process of looking at all those policies and procedures, both on the corporate level as well as here. And so we will certainly be providing you with more information as we move forward.
Yeah, that would be great as soon as you can. Anybody else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, commissioners.
Next up.
If I could invite Philip Page and Mark Rotundo from Cambridge College. Commissioners, I'd like to introduce, to my right is Philip Page, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships of Cambridge College, and Mark Rotundo, Vice President of Innovation and Strategic Initiatives at Cambridge College. Win Boston Harbor has indicated that they plan to hire over 4,000 individuals, including approximately 900 dealers and additional surveillance positions. And Cambridge College is vital to ensuring that we have a trained local workforce.
Thank you, Jill. Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
We are excited and welcome this opportunity to both present and participate in this initiative. We understand and recognize the significance of this for the Commonwealth, and in particular for employment opportunities for communities that we have held near and dear to our hearts as an institution for the 45 years we've been in existence. I'm going to walk through an introduction on Cambridge College, give you a sense of who we are as an institution, touch on the basis for partnership that we've engaged now with WIN, give a brief sense of the concepts around the Gaming Career Institute, and then follow that with an understanding of what the next steps are for the institution. So with regards to Cambridge College, Cambridge College is being led currently, or since 2011, by President Deborah C. Jackson. She came to the institution from a non-academic background, but has had a longstanding experience as a CEO and an executive in Massachusetts and in Boston, is well recognized in many communities as one of the leading executives in Greater Boston. We are a private, nonprofit, nationally accredited institution with a public mission. Over 45 years of providing accessible and affordable education to underrepresented individuals and communities. We're an institution with a historically diverse student body reflecting our primary market and community base, which is drawn almost extensively from the Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan community. And I will also point out that within the organization, within the institution itself, we have an amazingly diverse staff and leadership that's reflective of the student population that we serve. We have an array of academic programs, all of which are designed in a way to underscore access based on what our mission is all about, and a broad array of programs that really match our students' ability to be a part of the growing Massachusetts economy. We do workforce development programs that will be targeted for specific experiences. We have a range of undergraduate programs, graduate programs. We do in-seat offerings that you come to the campus for. We do online programs and a combination of the two. We have year-round operations, which gives our students an opportunity to be a part of the institution at any point in time that they have availability, which includes weekdays, nights, and weekends. In the fall of 2017, Cambridge College, which, as you can imagine with that name, Cambridge College, was based in Cambridge. We made a strategic move to Boston and to Hood Park in Charlestown. We consolidated all of our operations and made the decision based on a couple of very key factors. One, the access from Sullivan Station, the Orange Line, which was a direct connection to the communities that we serve. Two, ample parking that provided an opportunity for those coming from work at the end of the day to have ease of access to our campus. And three, the idea that all of the functions of Cambridge College could be combined into one facility, which made it that much more effective for us to manage through all of the needs that are very distinct demographic needed from an education standpoint. In academic year 2017, we enrolled 3,529 students. The average age of our students is 36. Over 70% are eligible for financial aid, which is indicative of the status that they are coming to us with and the significance of what we provide them as an opportunity for advancement in their careers and life-sustaining capabilities. We have more than 36,000 alumni, and with significant roots in Greater Boston, as I shared, with the majority coming from the Greater Boston area, and staying after graduation to be part of those communities with the new experiences and knowledge that they have. In addition to the Boston location, we have a Lawrence site, we have a Springfield site, we have a site in California, Rancho Cucamonga, and we have a site in San Juan, Puerto Rico, all of which operate with the same premise that we are serving a population that have had limited ability to access higher education, making it easy for them to do so in a very flexible and accommodating way. Over 70% of our students are women, and over 56% of our students are minorities. This next slide is really to underscore the commitment that the college has to diversity, quality programs, and the ability to serve targeted audiences successfully. We're listed as one of the best schools for Latinos by Latino Leaders magazine. We are recognized as a Hispanic serving institution. We are recognized by the Boston Business Journal as one of the largest MBA programs in Massachusetts. We're one of the top 5 business schools for African Americans. We're ranked 7th for most ethnically diverse colleges in America, and we're been officially designated as a military-friendly school for the past 5 years.
Could you, I would assume military-friendly means online classes. What else does that designate? I'm just not familiar with the term.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
There are several factors. One includes that we have a dedicated Veterans Coordinator who works with our veterans. We have a designated certifying officer for various post 9/11 benefits. We also participate in the DoD Memorandums of Understanding, and so we have tuition discounting for our veteran students. So it's a combination of those factors that are considered when looking at that designation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So as the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, one of the things that's very important in any relationship that the college engages in when approached is that the organization, we consider the alignment to the college's mission as paramount to any kind of relationship that we form. And so we are excited about what is transpiring in our conversations and in the development of this relationship with WIN, because the core principles of that relationship mirror the true mission of the college. There's a commitment to diversity, access, and affordability in alignment to that mission. So the ideas and information that's been shared already about the diversity of the talent pool that's being sought out, serving underrepresented populations, very consistent to the history of Cambridge College. The notion that these careers have outcomes that are targeted and also with the opportunity for advancement. That is, again, building on the foundation of Cambridge College's goals as an academic institution. The notion that those experiences that come through early training can actually be additive over time so that you can go from lower level workforce to achieve a bachelor's degree, ultimately a master's degree, all of which combining to give you opportunities to advance and grow within your position. That's also a function of what we see as important for the constituents that we serve. Absolutely the shared commitment to communities of Greater Boston, and a dedication to ensuring positive economic impact for the region. That's what developing the talent that's here translates to at the end of the day, that they have an opportunity to really deliver back to the Commonwealth. So with regards to the Greater Boston Gaming Career Institute concept, there are several things that, again, in alignment with the decision-making on the part of WIN that works very well for us. The college is strategically located in close proximity to the WIN Boston Harbor in Charlestown. We're just down the street. We have dedicated space to house and deliver the training program. Our model of accessibility for our programs can be translated into what we deliver for the Career Institute concept, making it accessible for days, nights, weekends, and with modules that are reasonable for individuals to access and to participate in. As one of the lowest priced colleges in Massachusetts, the consistency we have with the notion that affordability is paramount for everyone to have access and opportunity will also be layered into the concept for the Career Institute. The commitment to partner with community-based organizations and other community colleges ensures that we have access to that diversity and local pipelines, and we will absolutely continue that process. The notion of faculty being important, as you can see by the slides I shared earlier about the quality of the education at Cambridge College, this is important in this instance too. So faculty with gaming and surveillance expertise, that has to be part of the equation. We're also committed to ensuring rigorous gaming instruction, and that includes all of the aspects of not just the experience at the tables, but how do you manage yourself in that environment as well. With regards to the location, just wanted to make sure that it was clear. The Hood Park site is a campus that is going through a transformation at this point. Cambridge College, in moving to that site, became an anchor tenant. We invested quite a bit to pull all of our facilities together under one location. And within that, we have the distinction of having one area that we felt was perfect for the alignment with the goals of the gaming career concept. At 510 Rutherford Avenue, we have a space that is more than ample in terms of what it can provide for flexibility of layout for the configuration of the gaming school, and being a real anchor within the site as a destination for students who are coming. With that, I want to pass the discussion on next steps to my partner, Mark Rotundo.
Again, Commissioners, thank you. We have provided some information. We have already signed an agreement with WIN outlining the specific services that we will be working on together. We will initiate the
Excuse me,
game.
when you say specific services, do you mean the courses that you're gonna be offering? What do you mean by that?
So there are things in there that talk about the procurement of the curriculum. It talks about the procurement of the games themselves, the equipment. So those pieces that we need to put together for the gaming school application, we've outlined that within the agreement between us and WIN.
So what are the program content areas that your programming will cover?
So we will cover the gaming, table games, which will be poker,
Right.
blackjack, so forth, and then surveillance also.
Okay, so it's a counterpart to it's a mirror functionally to the one that we just opened in Springfield. It's only a table games training.
That is correct.
Okay,
And also surveillance.
and surveillance.
Correct.
Okay.
We will initiate the gaming school license. We will work with the folks at the Gaming Commission to do that. We will pursue funding options for scholarships and student engagement. It's core to our current practice and our business. We will establish, or we will continue to establish, relationships with our community-based organizations to recruit a diverse student body. We will continue to develop our collaborations with education and training providers such as Bunker Hill, Roxbury Community College, Everett High School, the Boston PIC, all of whom we've already met with and discussed this with, and Metro North Regional Employment Board and other workforce development boards. You'll see in your packet, we supported the application recently of the Boston PIC. And then our expectation, our hope is that should we navigate through the process of getting the license to operate the Career Institute, we would like to begin to operate beginning in the summer of 2018.
Questions?
First of all, thank you. Very encouraged by the work your campus out in Springfield is doing in partnership with MGM on a very innovative apprenticeship program. As the chairman pointed out, obviously, we have a gaming school that has been licensed out in Springfield. One of the concerns that was actually brought to our attention at our last meeting was with respect to people being able to afford the courses. And obviously, Wayne has pointed out that they plan to support some scholarships. Knowing that we have an interest in seeing underemployed or unemployed people have access to some of these careers, have you started to delve into those details about cost per classes and affordability and some of those issues that we saw kind of happen out in Springfield? We're obviously mindful of the impact that they might have, those same issues might have for the Boston area.
I'll start and probably have Mark follow on what I share. We have looked at the price point, and we started initially by looking strategically at it from a business standpoint. You know, what would it take to run the school? How can we manage it from a business standpoint? Following that, we looked at what the market was demanding in terms of what was happening in Springfield, what's with the gaming program that's currently be delivered out there, as well as what's happening in Bristol. We came up with a price point that we thought was reasonable in terms of where it would be attractive to a larger section of the population. Competitive in the sense that it was lower than what was being charged in Bristol and just a little bit more than what was being charged in Springfield. And at this point, we are still exploring that. We're still working with WIN and trying to understand the market better so that we can arrive at a number that we think would be most attractive and appropriate for the audiences that we will be trying to have access to it. I will point out that we're not a stranger to that situation because of the nature of Cambridge College in and of itself. We know that in serving underserved and underrepresented populations for the 45 years we've been in existence, you have to be creative around what is the financial model and how people access education. And so we will bring that to bear in our conversations with WIN and internally within the college itself to try to create a price point that is truly accessible for the greater majority of folks that we hope to come to the college.
Is there, just for my clarification, obviously you need to get the school licensed at the Gaming Commission. If you're a public college or university, you go through the Board of Higher Ed to get the curriculum approved. Are there similar steps that Cambridge College needs to undertake to have review of the curriculum? And
So Cambridge College, our charter is given to us or controlled by the Department of Higher Education.
okay,
So they will be part of that conversation. We will want to work with workforce development boards, and so the college has put programs through the workforce development board so individuals can have individual training dollars applied to programs that we offer. You referenced the programs in Springfield. Those are some programs we offer at our alcohol and drug counseling programs we've offered through that. So we expect that process and that regulatory process, they will want to see and review this curriculum as well as the commission.
great, thank you.
Others?
It's an impressive program. I see all the reasons. It's nice to hear more about the college and your goals and your mission. And it seems like a really good fit for the needs as well as for those folks who really need the jobs.
I was gonna ask the same question about the price points, so it sounds like bottom line is you don't have the price points yet, right? You're working on it still.
That's correct. We
Okay.
want to make sure that the price point that we ultimately land on it's absolutely appropriate.
Right, okay, well, I just would second what Commissioner Stebbins was saying. We want to see those as soon as possible. Those are really important, and we've learned that even a very modest price point can be a substantial discouragement to a lot of people that we're trying to reach. I mean, you know this from your work, but does Cambridge College have scholarship funds itself that it can, it says you're looking for funds. Do you have scholarship funds yourself that you could apply to this if need be?
So we're investigating that right now. For this particular program, because of the newness of this, and just to give the commission some framework, we began these conversations with WIN probably sometime in early November. So we are beginning that process. We have begun to speak with our chief financial officer. One of the things that we do offer students is tuition payment plans. And so we're looking to see how this would be something that students might be able to access. The partnership agreement with WIN with the 50 scholarships will go a long way to getting affordability. The PIC application with 30 to 35 scholarships. And what we will do is look at foundations and so forth as we do for our other students and our credit-bearing programs to see if they can access scholarships and community dollars.
Okay. Anything else, anybody?
Well, I just wanted to mention, as part of this whole section of the report, that while I agree that there's an awkward situation because we need to remain in parallel with this, with the local effort as well as the investigation, I see it as a very good sign that, that locally here things seem to be progressing really well in terms of partnerships like this, or the budget, or the comment about the financing. So I think the flip side would be if the project were to slow down or financing were to become an issue, the situation would be that much more awkward. So I think it's positive.
Great. Anything else, Director Griffin?
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It's now a little past 12. We're going to take a break. Why don't we reconvene at 1? Take a lunch break, do whatever else we need to do with the press, and then finish up at 1 o'clock. Okay. We are temporarily adjourned. All right. We're going to hate to interrupt this conversation because it's very interesting, but we are reconvening public meeting 239 on March 29th at about 1, and we are at item number 6, Legal Division, General Counsel Blue.
So good afternoon, Commissioners. We have a number of regulations before you today. We have folks from the legal department with our colleagues from the IEB to talk about them. The first one we're bringing to you is the internal controls. These are internal controls for table games. This is your first look at them. We want to begin the promulgation process. So I have Carrie Teresi from my department here, along with Director Band and Mr. Kane, to talk to you about that.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Afternoon.
So this is the third and final piece of the table game regs that we've brought to you. We already promulgated the rules of the game reg and the table game equipment regs, and now we'll seek approval to move forward with this set of internal control regs that relate to table games. So in your packet, you have the following. You have 138.23, which requires a system of internal controls related to table game drop boxes, including specifications for physical characteristics, a chain of command for handling those boxes, and storage. 138.32 requires internal control procedures related to the transport of those drop boxes from the tables to the count room. 138.29 requires a system of internal controls related to the responsibilities and functions of the main bank, marker bank, kiosk bank, and the chip bank. You'll see in your packet that we've also made a small change to 138.24, which governs internal controls related to the cage, just to tie these two sections together because they relate to similar material. 138.31 requires internal control procedures for accepting cash and coupons at gaming tables. We've made one small change to the version that you had in your packet, and I've left that for you at your seats. We removed section E, which dealt with promotional slot play and was placed in that section in error. That material is already covered by the existing 138.13, which governs internal controls for promotional credits. 138.35 requires internal control procedures related to opening and closing a table during a gaming day, as well as specifications related to table inventory slips and chip reserve compartments. 138.36 requires internal control procedures to include a verification process for the table inventory at the start of each day. 138.64 requires internal control procedures governing bills and credits. And 138.71 requires internal control procedures governing table game tournaments. We've also drafted 138.57 governing internal control procedures required for slot tournaments as a companion regulation to the table game tournament reg. Those were both, tournaments were previously covered under our rules of the game reg as 147.05, but as part of this review, we realized that that was really more appropriate in an internal control reg, so we're just moving that from 147 over to 138. So do you have any questions related to these draft regulations?
Anybody?
So 57 is slot machine tournaments.
Yes.
And tell me again, what did we do? Because we used to have these already, right?
So the tournament info was in 147 in the rules of the game reg. It was just in one piece covering table game and slot tournaments, but we've moved it over to internal controls, and we have a separate table game section and slot section just because that's the general layout of the internal control reg.
Anybody else? Mr. Stebbins, you look like you had a question? No, you got a motion.
I have a motion.
Okay.
I actually have a question
He's
in
got a
terms
question,
of
sir.
timing. Most of the regs, of course, that we've done in 138 is promulgating a minimum set of standards where they are supposed to submit a detailed plan. How is that timing going to work for MGM in this promulgation? Have they seen them? Have you seen some of what they have before?
Yeah, and some of their regs, I've already received their submissions covering, and a lot of these regs are regs that we've already approved.
Yeah.
We will give them the draft regs to develop that. If there end up being changes, they will make adjustments to their submissions accordingly. But
Right.
It seems like everything's working pretty well.
Ideally, do you have a sense as to when would you need to see their big draft or
It's
final
ongoing,
draft of
but I
their-
think by the end of May, we should have,
Yeah.
everything, at least majority of the stuff. There might be one or two items pending.
Right. Okay.
I did have a quick question. 138.23 referring to drop boxes. I mean, that's, looking at it, it's more of an equipment issue for the most part. Is there anything that deviates that would change up whatever MGM is buying? It's pretty industry consistent.
No, this, no, this is just a standard for what drop boxes have been for a long time. We would just want to make sure that it's a secure box and that it's going to snap shut when you pull it off the table. Standard things that have been used throughout the industry for years.
Okay.
So you also have small business impact statements in your packet for 138 and also for 147.05. So we would just want to approve those first, right?
We have a separate set of motions for 138 and then a separate one for 147. So if you're ready to have us start the process, we can start with the motion for 138 first.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'd move that the commission approve the small business impact statement for the amendments to 205 CMR 138. Uniform standards of accounting procedures and internal controls is included in the packet.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also move the commission approve the version of the amendments to 205 CMR 138, Uniform Standards of Accounting Procedures and Internal Controls is included in the packet, and authorize the staff to take all steps necessary to begin the regulation promulgation process.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
147?
That would be the next one. This is a little different for us because we're asking you to approve the removal of a section. I don't think we've asked you to do that before, even though we've moved it to another place. So that's what we're doing with 147.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, I move that the commission approve the small business impact statement for the amendments to 205 CMR 147.05 tournament, gaming tournaments as included in the packet.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
And I further move that the commission approve the version of the amendments in 205 CMR 147.05 gaming tournaments as included in the packet and authorize the staff to take all steps necessary to begin the regulation promulgation process.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
You pitched a shutout, Carrie. Yeah. You pitched a shutout.
Good team.
Are there others?
Okay, next up is
The next
Section
reg
B.
is 139.04. This is the computation of gross gaming revenue and treatment of the complementary vigorish. We brought this to you before. We had a good discussion on it. We've gone back and done some more work on it. So we have, in addition to our first presenters, we have CFAO Lennon to talk about this reg as well.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
I'm joined by a few members of the IB as well to talk about the update to 139.04, and then I think we'll do 140.02 as well. So they're two separate sections. The first one, 139.04, has to do with our regular reports that the Commission has to receive. And that currently we're asking for a side-by-side report, which basically lines up the casino's metered gross gaming revenue, the gross gaming revenue after the drop, and then our central management system's metered gross gaming revenue to see if there are any discrepancies and try and figure out where those come across. Right now, we're doing that in a very manual format. We worked with our first licensee to develop this, and the language in there asked for cash instead of drop, and we got a cash count, which is useless because it doesn't take the tickets in, doesn't take the ticket expense out, doesn't take hand pay, so it doesn't take the drop process into consideration. So we have to go back and change this. And then based on the GLI standards that we've approved, the licensee doesn't have to pay for the change in the report because it becomes part of the jurisdictional requirements. So in order for us to avoid getting our licensees billed for building the wrong report, we have to update this reg.
So the reg wasn't clear to the licensee.
It was not clear. It was not clear to the developers. They took a very literal reading of it, a cash read, how much was sitting there in the Dropbox, just in cash and bills, versus taking into consideration the whole drop process, which starts with cash and tickets, then subtracts out cash and subtracts out tickets, subtracts out and pays. So what we're looking for is the actual end of the drop gross gaming revenue calculation compared to the metered gross gaming calculation, and then compared to our metered gross gaming
that is useful.
calculation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that clears up the language here.
Okay.
Another
Motion?
one. Yes, I'll move that the commission approve. Well, do we have a small business impact statement as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Both on this page.
We do for this,
Yes,
and I think
I got it.
in the motion that I drafted, we would need to add the reference to 140.02. I don't know that I put that in your motion as well. We have two different regs to amend here.
Yeah, so I can move on to 140.02 now, or we can do 139.04.
We could probably do them together since they are
Okay.
connected. So why don't we let Derek present on 140.02, and then
Okay.
when you make your motion, we'll put them in both motions together.
Got it.
So 140.02 is a discussion I think we had about a month ago here regarding the complementary vigorish form, and the IB had come back and reported on how it may alter the rules of the game, may alter the payouts of the game. We had recommended, some of us have recommended that while it's a valuable business tool for the casinos, we don't necessarily agree that it should be taken out of the gross gaming revenue calculation. And at that point, we didn't have a lot of information. Since working with the MGM Shared Financial Services Group and looking at their audit paperwork, I can tell you that right now they operate in Illinois, Nevada, Mississippi, New Jersey, Michigan, and Maryland. Nevada and Mississippi do not include it in the calculation. The rest do. We did some research on Pennsylvania, Ohio, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, and none of those jurisdictions allow it to be excluded. So while we wouldn't be the only outliers, we would be in the minority if we allowed the reg to stand as it is rather than the redraft. I think that's one of the things you want us to look at. What do other jurisdictions do?
And by minority, you mean Nevada and Mississippi only?
And we would be joining
Joining
them.
But what you're proposing is that we join everyone else and make sure that if they comp the VIG, it's not
excluded.
It's not excluded from the gross gaming revenue.
Yes.
And you see other reasons other than other jurisdictions for that change, correct?
Correct. So the last time we talked about it, the IEB brought up a lot of good examples of how it would change the way the game plays,
I do
change the
recall.
payout.
Mhm.
And my personal opinion was we shouldn't be comping their advertising and promotional budget, which is basically what you're doing. You're taking what would have been part of a tax off of that expense side and letting them put it towards another area.
And they could still comp, whatever
They can still
play.
comp it. It's just they own
still do free
100% of
play.
it. They own
It
100%
just-
of that decision versus 75% of it.
Right. Well, I'm all for it. So I can move that the commission approve the small business impact statement for the amendments to 205 CMR 147.05
Mm-mm.
and
No,
140.02.
that one we already did. It's 139.04 and 140.02.
Oh.
We did 147.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I'll withdraw that motion and make it again. I move that the commission approve the small business impact statement and for the amendments to 205 CMR 139.04 and 140.02. And that is the update up to the computation of gross gaming revenues and the treatment to the complementary vigorish as included in the packet.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
And I further move that the commission approve the version of the amendments to 205 CMR 139.04 and 140.02. And that would be the update to computation of gross gaming revenue and the treatment of the complementary vigorish as included in the packet, and authorize staff to take all steps necessary to begin the regulation promulgation process.
Second.
Discussion?
Did we hear any more from licensees on this
We did
topic?
not.
We have not,
No
but we
public
can have an
comment.
opportunity to do that as part of this process.
Correct.
But this is final motion, right? This is moving into formal promulgation.
Promulgation.
This begins the process, so there will be time for
There will
comment.
be time.
Right, and there's already been time.
Yep.
Any discussion, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is,
So the next
Section D.
regulation is 205 CMR 136 and 138.12. This is the regulation that you had a public hearing on this morning. This is the final version. We have an amended small business impact statement and a final regulation. This is where we've conformed the times in the sale of alcohol beverages to what the statute requires. So if you approve this today, we'll finalize the promulgation process and we'll just get this done.
So, Mr. Chair, I move that the commission approve the amended small business impact statement for 205 CMR 136 and 138.12 sale and distribution of alcoholic beverages at the gaming establishments included in the packet.
Second.
further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
And I further move that the commission approve the version of 205 CMR 136 and 138.12 sale and distribution of alcoholic beverages at gaming establishments as well as included in the packet, and authorize the staff to take all necessary steps to finalize the regulation promulgation process.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
That's all we have for today.
All right.
Thank you.
Now we have Council Lilios.
Good afternoon,
From the
Commissioners.
IED.
I have, good afternoon. I have the suitability of an MGM qualifier for your consideration this afternoon. Mr. Michael Stratton is the Senior Vice President of Marketing for MGM Resorts Regional Operations, LLC. And I will provide a summary of the background investigation that was conducted by Trooper Kevin Murphy and financial investigator Paul Eldridge. Mr. Stratton joined MGM in April of 2017 as the Senior VP of Marketing for the MGM Resorts affiliate, MGM Regional Operations. He has submitted all of the required forms and answered provided requests for updated information. He was interviewed in person here at our Boston office, and he was cooperative and forthcoming in all respects. In keeping with all of the suitability investigations that we conduct, we verified his identity, confirmed his financial stability and integrity, reviewed litigation history, and searched his criminal history. Mr. Stratton has been in the gaming industry since 2001. He started his career in the gaming field at then Harrah's Entertainment, where he worked as a strategic planning and analysis manager. He then went to Harrah's Southern California, where he worked in 3 positions, first as a slot product manager, then as assistant director for marketing, and then as a VP of marketing. After Harrah's, he went to the Horseshoe Casino in Indiana for 3 years as the VP of marketing, and next he returned to Caesars, which had acquired Harrah's, for 6 years, first as a regional VP of VIP marketing and then as regional VP of marketing. From that position, he was offered the job as senior VP of marketing for MGM Resorts Regional Operations. He's responsible for overseeing the marketing for MGM's regional businesses, which will include MGM Springfield, the Borgata in Atlantic City, National Harbor, Gold Strike in Beau Rivage in Mississippi, and MGM Detroit. He graduated with a bachelor's in science from the University of Tennessee, which is his home state. He's currently licensed in a number of jurisdictions, or has expired licenses in a number of jurisdictions, including Mississippi, Maryland, New Jersey, Missouri, and Indiana. All of those jurisdictions were contacted and no derogatory information surfaced. He has demonstrated to the IEB by clear and convincing evidence that he is suitable, and the IEB recommends that the commission vote to find him suitable as a qualifier for MGM Springfield.
No, very clean report.
Anybody else? We have a motion?
Yep, Mr. Chair, I move that this commission approve the license of the qualifier Michael Stratton, who's the Senior Vice President of Marketing at MGM Resorts, Regional Operations LLC.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have good news and bad news. The good news is we're way ahead of schedule. The bad news is we're way ahead of schedule. I think there were some stakeholders related to number 8 who we informed based on our misinterpretation of how long things would take us, that they come not even potentially until about 2:45. So the good news is we could jump ahead to item number 9, which is commissioners' updates and has another section underneath it. I don't know how long that'll take us. Admittedly, hopefully not until 2:45, but if it does, it does. But we should maybe take that up and then see where we are.
That sounds good to me. So item number 9 is the performance review of the executive director. We've all had a chance to read this consolidated report. Having each of us submitted our own individual comments and having had Director Bedrosian's senior staff, his direct reports also submit comments. Does anybody want to lead off with characterization of our?
Do we want to take it category or no? Just an overall assessment? Do we need to go through the categories?
I'm comfortable with overall, but
Yeah, sure. Well, I think I'll speak for myself, but I just think that the executive director is doing an excellent job. Not easy to communicate up as well as down. Really, some of the things I think are important is kind of the morale building, the emails that go out to staff to let them know what's going on, to let them feel included, to include those folks out at Plain Ridge who work 24/7. Always, I know that's, as someone who did that work, it's always nice to be recognized when you're working a midnight shift. So I think those things are really important. Certainly not everyone's, going to be overall ecstatic, but that's, we're getting larger as an organization. And I think, the relationships, and I use that word with the licensees is important. It's not a relationship as much as it is an understanding of what our expectations are and an ability to listen to what some of their concerns are. I think that's another area that Executive Director Bedrosian does very, very well.
Anybody else?
Well, let me just say, I think there's so many positives, and a lot of that is already reflected in the evaluation. I think there's great skills, a lot that you bring, and you have brought a lot of that you've you wrote a very steep learning curve in this short tenure, now going on 2 years, and that's really important and significant, coming from a very relevant background that to this commission, but new to gaming. And that's really positive. A lot of what Commissioner Cameron was saying, building relationships, is really positive. You're in the unique position of dealing with a unique body as a report in this context, and to 5 people, and then leading the agency administratively as that one person. So that'll continue to be a role to be thought through and examined as we evolve as an agency, and as we try to always strike that balance that is always challenging. The luxury that we have here at the Commission, bringing different perspectives and different priorities, is one that you have to really manage and try to strike constantly in many ways. And some of the comments that I read from some of the directors begin to speak a little bit to that, how I believe challenging it can be trying to strike the balances in looking more favorably or less demanding, if you will, in one situation or another. I think that will be here with us because that's for a while. I might argue permanently, but it's something that we need to continue to pay attention. If there's any kind of biases that we all bring because of the position that you're in, it's especially important to kind of pay attention to those. So how you involve your leadership team, how those decisions are made, those administrative decisions are made or brought to us for policy decisions, will continue to be that challenging. I think overall it's really positive. It's great that we have now included this aspect of the review, and I think it should be taken as a very positive that we first have it, and we have it candidly, and we could just pay attention to it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would just only add to this. I've been impressed with the executive director's performance. I think when you came in, you weren't landing right on top of an open process, but you've had this opportunity to build a relationship with our existing licensee. You've had a chance to work with your team to prepare for the opening that is in front of us in September. And I think to that degree, you get points for starting that process and initiating that process as early as we can. I mean, we're obviously still going through it. At the same time, you're managing a organization that, by virtue of all the introductions we saw, we continue to grow, and we're picking up the pace. That said, and Commissioner Zuniga touched on it, you're also responsible to 5 individual bosses. And each of us comes to this job with different experience, different background, different interests, and yet I have always found you willing to address all of those interest questions that we raise with, a really an open mind to all of it. You obviously come with a great deal of background and experience from your legal work, from your investigatory work, but at the same time, you've developed the nuances of the finances. You've developed an interest in the economic development and workforce issues. So kind of building out your team and building out your interests, as well as I think appropriately working with 5 bosses. I think you continue to excel at. I think in this isn't necessarily discussion about your performance, but I think as we go forward, I would like to see us as a commission tackle your performance review in a little bit more timely fashion. I definitely, when I'm doing these, I always try to relate actual factual anecdotes, and if we let too much time go by, it makes that a little bit challenging. But overall, again, I think you've done a great job of hiring a good team around you. And again, I think paying a fair amount of respect and prioritization to all the individual directors in their areas of work. And I think that's not easy, and that's a credit to your performance.
I would pretty much second all of that. We've all discussed that this is kind of a weird and awkward situation to have a performance review in a public setting. It's got to be one of the strangest parts of the applications of the open meeting law. And it's hard not to, because of that, to make this into just a happy talk session. And having said that, however, I'm going to read one summary comment because I know the person who wrote this particular comment quite well. The EDA has done well in assuming a strong leadership role, which includes an unexpected sensitivity to staff morale and esprit de corps. He's done a very good job of taking the reins of the organization and becoming the executive director. And that is my summary thoughts at in the extreme. There are gently tucked into the public document some constructive suggestions having to do with balancing the interests of the different departments, having to do with what we've all mentioned, this issue of balancing the commissioner's role versus the staff role and the tensions that are inherent in that, and a few other little nuggets are stuck away in there. And it's important to pay attention to them. But were this public or private, I'd be saying the same thing, which is, on balance, you've done a terrific job, and I think we all feel fortunate to have you here.
Thank you. Look, I'm public evaluation process. Yes, it's awkward. So we've had a couple awkward things today. But having said that, I appreciate and recognize that, one of the core values here, as we've talked about, is transparency. Whether it's for our decision-making process, we harken back to my process of being hired. That was a public event also. I particularly want to thank staff. I don't, whatever success I may have is I attribute to the great staff, many of whom had been hired either by you all or by my predecessor. People with expertises that I don't think I quite appreciate. It takes some time to be around these people because they don't pound their own chests. They're quietly very successful in their own right. So that helps any leader in any organization. Having said that, I'm not perfect. I take to heart and appreciate a 360 evaluation where people above, below, and around you are commenting on your successes and maybe not so much because it makes you think of how you're perceived by other people. And maybe you don't always view it that way yourself, and it helps to get a little bit of a reality check, and I think that's good for anyone. So I'm gonna take those nuggets, Mr. Chairman, as you say, to heart, and try and improve on that aspect of what I might need to improve on. But I consider myself very fortunate to be in this position, work for this body. Janice Riley coming in said, something's going to happen. It's not going to be a smooth ride or something like that. I'm like, oh, come on, we just got to open some casinos. Well, she was right.
Janice said that.
But having said that, look, there are challenges to this job. It's an important job, and I'm very fortunate to have it. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So just before you move off that topic, what you did last year at this point in time was you decided whether you wanted the executive director to receive an increase in compensation commensurate with what was done for the rest of the staff, and then to let the HR department implement that. So that's a decision you can make now, you can make later, however you want to do it, but that's, in fairness, we've taken the staff through that process, and it's important to take the executive director through as well.
And so you just know, Commissioner rest of the staff, I think, was at 2%. We'd set 2% in the budget, a 2% raise. So
and this would be retroactive to the time of the performance review, but should have? or time
To
of
the last time that he had his compensation reviewed, and I can't remember off the top of my head how big a period that is, but from the last time, yes.
Right.
Staff we do every year, we're a little bit more timely with staff.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly think that's deserved, the compensation that the other staff members received.
And I'm sorry, let me just be clear, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's not a 2% raise. It was a 2% merit adjustment.
Mhm.
So for my level, for some people below a certain threshold, it was a raise. For people above a certain threshold, which I would be above, it was a merit adjustment. So it would not be a permanent adjustment to salary.
It would not be a permanent.
It would not be a permanent adjustment to salary.
No, for people over a certain level, it was a lump sum payment. So it's not added on to the base pay and then increases every year. It was basically just a merit adjustment.
And why did you do that? That was your decision.
It was my decision. It had to do with the, permanent scale of salaries potentially going up. We are still, and not that, but let me be clear, not that I wouldn't love to give everyone a flat out raise, but we are still, we'll always be under certain budget pressures, I think. And we want to be responsible to those budget concerns. When we're up and operational, things may be slightly different, but we, especially at this time, I think when, Commissioner Zuniga and I were looking at this situation, which our budget was increasing because we had to have necessary preparations for opening these casinos. But at the same time, there was no revenue coming in from the Category 1 casinos. So we're trying to find that balance, and maybe that will change in the future.
Right.
We're trying to be respective of, and it might be a little symbolic, but we thought it mattered.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think there's a couple of components to be uniform with what we've already implemented with the rest of staff is very valuable. But also, just looking around other agencies, there's important benchmarks for us to consider, and that's a context that's part of the equation here. Commissioners, for example, have not had their own salaries adjusted because the state has had a bit of a weight approach in the last couple of years, and that's an important part of the context, I might argue. So I would fully endorse the approach to be consistent with the rest of the staff, and just let HR implement it in a similar way.
I would too. I assume we need a vote on this, right?
I'd be happy to move that the commission accept the performance review here as part of the packet, and as a result, direct the Human Resources Department to increase the salary of Director Bedrosian in a manner that is consistent with the increases that we have implemented for the rest of the staff as part of this performance review process.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
Do we have everybody here from the? Okay, all right.
Good.
We'll take this one break.
Some stakeholders.
Yeah. Director Lightbound.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
We're going to take things a little bit out of order today. We're waiting for some folks to get here since pleasantly we're running ahead for once. First of all, Steve O'Toole regrets that he couldn't be here today, but he's busy getting the track ready. And he's basically got a standard operating procedure of getting his racing officials and essential personnel approved by the commission.
So this
some
is
of them are,
item 8E.
yeah, this is item E, sorry. Most of these people are still in the process of getting their licenses. They'll have their first qualifiers next Tuesday, so they'll all be in for that. So I'm asking for you to recommend them pending the satisfactory completion of their licensing and their background checks by the state police. And again, they're all returning folks. They've been with Plain Ridge last year, if not longer than that.
And you can attest for their, that they're all doing a fine job.
Right, exactly.
Great.
Every single one of these is returning?
Yes.
So,
All right.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the request of Plain Ridge Park Casino to approve their March 22nd, 2018 list of key operating personnel and racing officials pending satisfactory completion of licensure by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission Racing Division and satisfactory completion of their background checks by the Massachusetts State Police.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
The next item, we'll skip to item D, the Harness Horsemen's Association of New England, their pension plan. This was brought before you a couple of weeks ago, and we had a 2-week period waiting for any responses. The Gaming Commission did not receive any comments. The Harness Horsemen's Association did get one response that was signed by 2 or 3 different people that's in your packet. And then the Harness Horsemen responded to them with their concerns. As you know, in any organization, and when you're trying to set parameters on what the different stakeholders would receive, there might be some differences of opinion, but I think it was clear from the hearing that we had that they have put a lot of thought and time into this. So my recommendation is that we go ahead and approve their pension, the parts of their pension plan that they've presented. And again, that's part of the Racehorse Development Fund wording, that it has to be approved by the commission.
Yeah, I was impressed with the research, with the plan. It's really a good news story that they're able to now provide this pension plan for the horsemen. And the thoughtful letter that they did in response to the letter raising some concerns, I thought was excellent. Really, point by point, taking the time to explain how they made the decision. I just think this has been handled very appropriately.
I would agree. And I think, as I say at the last meeting, I like the fact they built in some added incentives for Massachusetts residents to really benefit. I was wondering if it'd be possible, since this is new and this is just ramping up, if we could find some time, either at a 6-month period, a year period, to have them kind of come back and give us a status report as to how the
I
program
think
is
that's a good
going.
idea, and they may have some, after it's been implemented, they may come up with some changes that they may want to make. As with anything, you try to think of all the things ahead of time, but once it goes into effect and they see how it works for the year, they may actually want to change a few things and bring it back anyway. So I think it's a good idea to do the plan.
I think it behooves us to kind of keep an eye on it. It's new and we want it to be successful.
I actually think that's an excellent idea, and I have a similar requirement or ask of these as part of the reporting. And by the way, I should back up. I think this is a great plan. It's very well thought through, and ultimately I favor it. But if we could make a requirement that somehow they provide a yearly update or education to their membership that's really proactive in terms of communicating that what their benefits are, because there's here an incentive by those that remain to gain from people leaving the system. If somebody leaves, stops racing, etc., whatever they accrue comes back to the rest of the membership.
Right.
Which is fine. It's what's done in other states, and it's very appropriate from a sort of financing standpoint. I want to add the requirement that they, at least yearly or some other period of time, educate the membership relative to those things, those benefits that accrue, or when, the points, make a difference after the vesting time and all of those things.
Yeah. Part of the plan is to give each person that's in the plan a statement every year. So, at the end of this year, they'll get together their number of points and present it to each person to show them, and also for the person to look at it, verify that those are the number of points that they feel they should have. So if there's any discrepancies, they can take care of it. So that, automatically they'll get their statement every year that'll remind them. And then it's certainly good to remind them in general.
Right.
And any new members that might come in, what the
Right.
plan would be like.
But if there's an embedded notion of periodic education process,
Mhm.
whether it's an annual meeting or in addition to the statements, which are very important, but we know what happens, certainly, you get used to receiving statements,
Yeah.
and people don't pay attention. If it was a proactive effort, doesn't have to be all the time, I would be very comfortable given, the
I'm sure
context
they'd
of
be
all this.
amenable to doing that.
Great.
Yeah, good idea. I guess we need to vote on this one too. Commissioner Horse Racing?
Yep, so, Mr. Chair, I move that the commission approve the rule and eligibility requirements of the Harness Horsemen's Association of New England pension plan as presented to the commission on March 15, 2018.
Second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Then I think we can go ahead and skip to item B, the Suffolk Downs request to amend their racing dates. Oh, okay. We should go ahead and go back to the normal schedule of the racing agenda now, if we'd like.
So you want to go to A?
Yeah, we can go to A.
Okay.
So in front of you for item A, Suffolk Downs Racecourse purse request, there's a letter from Suffolk Downs requesting that all of the money was scheduled for thoroughbred racing purses be delivered into the account instead of just what we do now is during the racing season, Chip Tuttle will tell me what they're anticipating they need for a particular weekend, and we'll put that money into the account. Last year, I think we did the first 2 weekends in one bunch, and then at the end of the year, at the end of their races, we save a little bit back so that at the very end we can get it right down to the penny, and so we're not asking for anything back at the end of the season. Let's see. The regulations do allow for the commission to give a smaller amount of money, and I think at this point I'll turn it over to Catherine Blue to discuss some of the different legal issues and the regulatory issues.
So we have two letters in the packet. One is the request from Suffolk Downs, and then we have a letter from the attorney for the NEHBPA requesting the entire balance of the thoroughbred portion of the purse account. And as is pointed out in the attorney's letter, the statute does in fact say that this money will be deposited weekly into a purse account held by the track for the benefit of the horsemen, and it's an interest-bearing account. However, that does not take into account our regulations 205 CMR 149, which gives the commission the ability to award in its sole discretion less than the full amount. And the reason for that is that obviously when this was passed, back when the Racehorse Development Fund legislation was passed in 2011, we had 2 tracks in the Commonwealth that raced between 60 and 80 days, maybe more. They did not, at the time, I don't believe, hit the 100-day requirement to simulcast, but they got the legislature to sign off each year on a lower number of days. So when the legislature was looking at purse monies, that's what they anticipated. I don't think they ever anticipated a situation where there would be 6 days of racing. So just ballpark numbers, we're talking about approximately 42 races in a meet as opposed to what you looked at for the harness horse racing meet this year of about 1,200. There just isn't the need, particularly for the level of purse money that's been in the account. So you have the ability under the regulation to do that. That regulation also goes on to give you the ability in the event a track closes or a new track opens to escrow that money if you're requested to do so, or to transfer it to a new track if the track should open. So I would say that I think you're well within your rights to award a lesser amount than the full amount that is in the account. To address a little bit the issue of whether it's an interest-bearing account, It is correct that the horseman's account at the track has to be interest bearing. The Commonwealth account, you as the commission are the trustee for the funds in this account. Those accounts at the treasurer level are invested in accounts that that may have interest on them. The Commonwealth, in its discretion, takes the interest off of all the accounts that are trust accounts, and that goes back to the Commonwealth. So I think that you are within your rights to continue to do what you have done in prior years for the thoroughbreds and award an amount that's appropriate to the number of races involved.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to a couple of those points because I think you mentioned the regulation, and that's very important. But I actually, going back to the statute, the letter from Mr. Raphael, where he only mentions one piece of the section relevant to the deposit. There's two very important provisos in the same statutory language, and that is that give me a second. Provided that those funds be combined with
with existing purse monies, yes.
money, and provided that they are consistent with the purse agreement. So in this case, is there a purse agreement for future years for all this money that you request? No, I'm talking about the request seems to be for the whole amount. Is there a purse agreement beyond this year?
No, there's a purse agreement for 2018, which includes this provision that we request all of the available thoroughbred funds.
But you're not going to use them.
Well, we.
When are you going to raise?
I would say that we plan to use them, and if we don't, then certainly we could pay them back to the commission. But
is that planning the purse agreement?
The current purse agreement is for 6 days for this year, so we would not. If the total amount is 12 million, we do not plan to pay 12 million over 6 days.
Right.
We do plan to pay daily purses consistent, maybe a little bit higher, but consistent with what we have the last several years of about 500,000 a day.
Right. So it's fair to say that you don't have a plan to use the rest of the money.
Well, in November, we did announce our plan to move forward with the New England Thoroughbred, the New England HBPA and the Massachusetts Thoroughbred Breeders Association on a plan to develop a new racing facility in the Commonwealth. We've been working against that since the end of last year and have looked at several properties. And we are seeking legislative conditions similar to the bill that the commission filed that would allow money from the Racehorse Development Fund to be used for operating expenses and capital improvements as part of that. So I'll let the horsemen speak for themselves here, but as the entity requesting the money, there were grave concerns last year when there were legislative attempts to sweep the fund. And the horsemen, the breeders, and us together thought it would be prudent to make the request to draw down the thoroughbred portion of the fund so that we are holding it on behalf of future purse expenses, as opposed to it dangling out there where some quarters of the legislature may try to take it and use it for other purposes.
Yeah, but that's not a purse agreement. That's a plan.
Well, it's both, actually. I mean, our purse agreement for 2017, for 2018, has a provision, an amendment that we put in earlier this year that we request all of the thoroughbred funding available.
And where are you going to raise for all of that thoroughbred funding?
Well, we're working on that part of it.
Okay, so it's still a plan.
Yeah.
Okay. There's another piece that I want to also talk about, which you alluded to, and that's the interest-bearing notion. And there's two pieces of the statute here that are also relevant. The section that creates the Racehorse Development Fund speaks to the fact that there shall be established and set up on the books of the Commonwealth the Racehorse Development Fund. So as far as it goes, it's the Commonwealth's money because it sits, that money gets deposited from the Category 2 assessments for taxes. At that point, it's the Commonwealth's money. It is for the benefit of the for the benefit of the horsemen, provided that there's a purse agreement and there's an understanding that there's going to be a certain number of races the following days, but over the following years. But currently, that figure, whatever it is, 12 million, I believe, rounding up, is in the books of the Commonwealth, and it's the Commonwealth's fund. It is also generating interest for the Commonwealth, which is the case for any other agency with public monies. The treasurer sweeps, it's called, all of those accounts overnight, invests all of those monies for all of the agencies, and gets significantly competitive rates, overnight rates in terms of interest bearing. There's one element that I hadn't thought of because there's a conflicting section where the statute talks about interest that belongs to the Racehorse Development Fund can also be credited to the Racehorse Development Fund, but that's a discussion that we would have to, talk to the comptroller and the treasurer. I don't think it's gonna change. So I did want to dispel the notion that this is money that is the horsemen's money, because while it sits at the Racehorse Development Fund, it's the Commonwealth's fund or monies. So it is very possible, and it would be their prerogative for them to scoop it. They would have to go through the legislative process, and we're aware of efforts that have failed to scoop that up, and it would be up to them to figure out what do they want to benefit. We've maintained now for a number of months, and we filed this legislation. What is it, going on 3 years now, or
2 years?
2 years.
2 years.
That we feel could really help the thoroughbred industry if that was implemented. Monies available from the fund could go a long way towards being able to be used in ways that it would be helpful. But at this point, it would be really inappropriate of us to deposit these funds, given that there is no certainty that there will be Suffolk Downs operating next year. By your own accounts, you are saying that you're closing that track, and while you have other important plans about elsewhere, there's anything but just plans.
We certainly don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm completely in agreement with you, Commissioner, that we don't have any plans to disperse the funds into purses in 2018, though there is a chance that we could decide to raise more days this year and come back to you with a supplemental request for dates. I would defer to others on the reading of the statute. We believe that the statute is pretty clear on this. The Commission is seeming to take a different point of view. I'll defer to my attorneys on that and the HBPA.
Yeah, no, and well, do you want to speak to that, Mr.?
Just a couple of points, because I don't think that I agree with all of your views on the reading of the statute, including the provisos, and I just...
But you agree that we're the trustees of the money and we get to make the decision.
I agree that you're the trustees of the money, But I also think the statute is pretty clear that it's supposed to be deposited weekly into the purse account of the licensee. So one of the statutory interpretation issues that I think we disagree on is whether the money should be in the Racehorse Development Fund or should be in the purse account of the licensee. And I believe you may have been conflating the two in your comments earlier. Maybe not, but the statute's pretty clear that it's supposed to be deposited weekly. It comes in, yes, currently from the Category 2 licensee into the Racehorse Development Fund, but it's only there for a very brief period of time before the statute says it must be donated or deposited into the licensee's purse account. And it's the purse account where the interest is accrued, and the interest has to go back into the purse account, different from the Racehorse Development Fund.
But wouldn't you think it would be irresponsible for us to deposit into the licensee's purse account, knowing full well that there might not be a licensee next year?
No.
You don't think that would be irresponsible?
I don't. It's obviously your judgment to make how to proceed. And I think in the first instance, you're obligated to follow the statute. And before I lose track of it, I think the proviso that relates to the purse agreements doesn't require that there be a purse agreement in effect for all future uses of Racehorse Development Fund money. I think the point there is that the Racehorse Development Fund purse funds are in supplement to other purse funds that are provided for in the purse agreements. The money has statutory purposes. I think Suffolk Downs has shown over time that it is a careful steward of the Racehorse Development Fund monies only for approved statutory purposes, and there's no reason to think that it would be any different going forward. And there is no security for these funds, which are buy-in for the future of the horsemen, staying in the Racehorse Development Fund, giving the increased legislative attention to them.
Well, there's another section of the statute that speaks very clear, in my view, of us having to follow the rules and regulations of the comptroller. And I happen to believe that if we were to do this, but we could always ask the comptroller to do this with this conflicting interpretation, if you will, of the statutory sections, that they would simply not let us do it. Plain and simple. I think there's enough uncertainty about all of these that for us to make a move like this would be, I don't know, just inappropriate. This is how I feel. We could always, ask the comptroller, and I'm going to guess that they would very quickly agree with us staying on the safe side and keeping the money where it currently sits, rather than make such a move.
Commissioner, I would just add that while we are working toward the development of a new racing facility and hope to have more concrete plans to share with the commission in the near future, as we look toward that development, the idea that we would already have $8 million in a purse account available to us is a very important step in assuring that development would go forward. So, not that it wouldn't continue to be potentially in the Racehorse Development Fund, but that we would actually have it in the purse account. That's an important distinction due to what we've all mentioned and what we saw, some legislative attempts to take the money out of the fund, right? So it's part of our larger partnership with the horsemen and the breeders to try to ensure the future of racing.
I just don't see it that way. We can, reasonable people can disagree. I think if you had a plan, if you came back in the near future, however far or near that may be, with something that is a lot more tangible, we would entertain it. We would look at it. We can make the disbursement, however partial or in total, at that time. But and we've been at this for a while. These plans have been in the works for now more than a few months. Let's just say more than a couple of years. The notion of a track somewhere and another track or a. Well,
our plans. We only commenced this effort in November. of last year. That was the horsemen investigated on their own and looked at opportunities for the horse park concept. We're not able to bring that to fruition. We stepped in and formed an agreement to work together late in the year last year. So we have been working hard toward that goal, and I've toured several properties in Western Mass and Central Mass and Southeastern Mass, and I'll be back in Central Mass next week. And we're working diligently toward bringing a plan to you as quickly as we can.
So we'll listen to it as quickly as we can.
I have,
Yeah, you gotta, hold on.
if you're gonna come up, you can come up here, Mr. Spidia. And very quickly, please.
Mr. Chair, just remind us, we're actually having this stenographer do this remotely today. Might not notice. So if we could just have people introduce themselves.
Is the light on?
Sit down, I've never done that before. My name is Anthony Spadier. I'm president of the New England HBPA and have been for a number of years. In all due respect, Mr. Thediga, I don't agree with you whatsoever, and here's my reasoning. The standardbreds, the breeders, are given their money on anticipation of running races. They're able to get their money and get it weekly and invest it and make interest and make money on it. I don't think we've ever shown you any reason to distrust the integrity of us or Suffolk handling money that was designated for purses. The opportunity for us to get our money weekly and invest it, not saying the Commonwealth shouldn't have the opportunity to do what they do, but they don't do it for anybody else. You've chosen to choose our money to be held without giving us an opportunity to keep our money in escrow and earn probably $200,000 to $300,000 a year, which would
Not in this environment, Mr. Spadia, I can tell you that.
Listen, I'm a financial planner. Believe me, I can make 2% of that money with no risk at all.
I hope
Been
it's
one
not
for
in
50 years.
cryptocurrency, by the way.
But that's irrelevant. What's important to me is protecting the money for the horsemen and the future opportunity of trying to build a facility. We've tried very hard over the last 2 years without any credit because of the fact that it's a difficult thing to get investors today to want to build a racetrack. Nowhere in the country is a racetrack been put up without a casino beside it.
Mr. Spidia, I think we know this point, so we've heard.
The big thing I want to get at is this. We would sign anything saying that if that money wasn't used to fund purchases of races, that money would go back to the Commonwealth immediately. We would like the opportunity to safeguard that money, to give us the possibility in the next year, if the Suffolk Downs group comes up with a location and comes up with a plan, so that if there's new leadership in the legislation, if everybody knows what I'm talking about, this possibility of that money disappearing is very realistic.
Okay.
In the near
Mr.
future.
Spadia,
We've heard that point.
Yeah, can I just say, I think that point is an excellent point to make to the legislature.
We have.
To support the update to the legislation that has been up there for now a few years. We'll get to you in a minute, sir. Because we are currently in a legislative limbo with a law that has been kicked for 1 year at a time with very uncertain terms. I remember full well when that was first passed, there was an expectation that there were going to be between 1 and 50 races. And when you came back with 3 race meet, there were a lot of people that were sorely disappointed by that read.
Including us.
Including, yeah, I understood, as I was as well.
Including us.
But the language was very clear that it only had to be between 1 and 50. Now, because that legislation has been just being renewed year after year, I would submit to you that that has created a real uncertainty to potential investors about, you know, deciding to put money there, which, again, your point is a good one. You would be making it to the wrong body, I would submit to you. That would be the legislature to create a framework, at the same time protecting that Racehorse Development Fund money, and that would all have to be ironed out there to go forward.
We're doing that. We are making, we are active in our government relations effort at the current time in trying to eliminate the barriers to investment. Being licensed on a year-to-year basis is a very difficult barrier to investment, and so we're looking at trying to assure a longer-term extension of our license and the longer-term protection of the Racehorse Development Fund as conditions of us being able to invest in a new facility.
Neil Rayfield on behalf of the NHPPA. Just one quick point. I disagree with Councilor's blue reading of the law, but if the commission is inclined, the statutory provision that she cited, or the regulatory provision, does allow the commission to create a racing escrow account on the commission level. So the commission can take the funds that are currently there in the Racehorse Development Fund and deposit them into an escrow account that's completely managed by the commission, and then the interest will accrue in that escrow account. And then the commissioners, if there's no facility within 3 years, I believe the regulatory provision says the Racehorse Committee makes a recommendation to the commission as to what to do with the funds. But if they don't want Suffolk to have the funds, to manage the funds, then I would argue that the commission should at least create a racing escrow account at the commission level, given the closure of Suffolk Downs, so that we earn interest for the horsemen and we escrow the funds.
Well, that's along the lines of what I was alluding to in terms of asking the comptroller, for example. It just feels to me that making such a drastic move at this point, with the uncertainty that is the fact that Suffolk Downs is closing, is it not? Or do you plan to run?
Yeah, I mean, I
have it
want
open in 2019.
I want everyone to be clear on the difference between the sale of the property and the continuation of the racing and wagering operation. I mean, we have sold the property. We sold the property in May of 2017, but we specifically held on to the racing and wagering business with the intention of continuing. Now, our ability to continue at the Suffolk Downs property beyond 2018 is not, there's not a great chance of us being able to do that, but there is some chance. There's no development taking place on the property yet, and the developer has certainly done a lot of work to prepare for the Amazon opportunity and other opportunities. But I can't. I heard Attorney Raphael refer to Suffolk Downs closure and other people. I want to be clear here that we continue to stay in business as long as we can, and continue to seek the legislative conditions to do that.
Well, and I think the other piece we haven't spoken about, first of all, we've never had a request to escrow monies.
There are, I know as Attorney Raphael reads the entire regulation, there are triggering events that would result in a request to the commission. We have not seen those triggering requests. I'm sure if there was one, the commission would entertain a request to escrow the money. But I have also discussed this with many of the individual horsemen who have raised a similar issue. So if one of those events that's described in the regulation occurs, I'm sure the commission would entertain a request.
And I think the other thing we really haven't mentioned is we're aware of another proposal out there that another entity other than yourself that would like to use an existing track to build another track, and have are now working as you are with your proposal, the legislature, and they believe they can be open as soon as next summer to race. So another issue for us, and again, that's not in our hands, that's in the legislature's hands, and I think we'll know those things within 90 days. And that's where those things stand right now, that it's really not in our hands, but it is something to mention when we speak about that money.
No.
I want to back up a step. When General Counsel Blue started her remarks, she commented that the statute states pretty clearly that 80% of the money should go in on a weekly basis, but then that we had regs. Would you show me where in the regs it gives us the authority to give less than all of it, if you're not talking about 149.03, which was the notice to discontinue?
It's 149.04 section C.
149.04 section C. Now, when we did this, that's pretty straightforward. When we wrote this reg, we had a public comment period where everybody was asked to comment on it, and I didn't even remember doing this, so I don't remember anybody on your side of the table objecting to this reg. Am I correct that you didn't? That we had a comment period that nobody objected to writing the reg this way?
I don't recall whether we did or we didn't. I'll take your word for it, Commissioner.
I don't know. Director Blue, Counsel Drew Blue, do you remember whether there was?
I don't recall that we had comments on this section of the reg, no. At the time, this reg was promulgated around the time that Suffolk Downs announced it was going to close. And so we wanted to make sure we had something in regulations that would allow us to address that, as well as a situation where there was less racing.
Do you have a comment?
My comment is, I don't recall whether we or anybody else commented on that particular part of the regulation. At the same time, whether someone has commented on a regulation or not, a state agency's authority cannot include writing regulations that are in direct contravention of their statute. And so that's a.
But it's not in direct contravention of the statute.
Well, let me finish my my train of thought here. I don't understand actually how it isn't in direct contravention of statute. If I happen to think that it does make sense to not distribute the full amount from a standpoint of public policy for the reasons that are essentially described in this, and I also happen to think that protecting the money from is a good idea, and that we've spoken about that. We've testified to the legislature that we would think it's premature to scoop that money into other uses with it. But we are bound by, for good or ill, the statute. And how do we read this to, how do we read little I to give us the authority to do section C that you just referred to?
Because if you look at chapter 128A and C that governs racing, and then you look at the addition of 23K section 60 that creates the Racehorse Development Fund, what you realize is you have to look at them in conjunction. And 128A and C envisions a full racing schedule. And it envisions that the Racehorse Development Fund really is only a supplement to purse money, because purse money originally came from both the track and from takeouts from wagers. So the idea behind the Racehorse Development Fund, and assuming the legislature did what other jurisdictions have done, was to create a supplement that would increase the number of racing days that would then allow the racing business to thrive. When we got to the point where the Racehorse Development Fund was finally funded, which wasn't until late in 2014, and then when PPC really got up and running in 2015, we had a situation where the thoroughbred racing was reduced greatly, from 50 to 60 days down to between 6 and 8 days. The statute never envisioned a situation that, what would you do with the money if there wasn't a full racing schedule? Our regulation is not designed to conflict with it, but it's designed to fill in the gaps when the legislation and what the reality is don't match. That's why we have the ability to escrow money if the track closes or if a track is transferred to someone else. It's to explain the regulation, to explain the statute in more detail when the situation around the statute changes. Can
I add to that, because I think that's critical. at the same time that that statute was written, the legislature contemplated that there were needed changes to 128A and 128C, which we submitted in time. There was a real deadline for it. The legislature has not acted on those. And that's part of my point, perhaps what really necessitated that regulation. Because if they had, we would be talking about an entirely different set of circumstances here. The statute itself anticipated that 128A and C had to be looked at, which again, we submitted in due time around 2014, I believe.
Around 2014, they requested that we study it and draft a
Yes.
report, submit it to the legislature, which we did. And we submitted it probably more than once because we got some questions on it.
3 times, I think.
And I would submit to everybody that that was part of the plan, that if it all converges, everything can get sorted out.
Right, but it didn't converge, and
Right.
this,
Which is the genesis of our regulation, having ourselves the ability to be flexible and responsive.
it feels to me like this is this issue of administrative construction. What authority does the regulatory agency, the administrative agency, have to interpret the statute? We've come up against this 2 or 3 different times, the most recent one being a major debate on whether or not we should use our judgment to correct what seemed to us to be a mistake in the SER, in the service employees. And we made the clear decision not to assert our authority to describe that as we wanted. I was on the other side of the argument. I felt we should be loose constructionists and use our authority to interpret the statute as we felt they probably would have intended. And I believe in that as an authority, but I don't find this as mixed as I did the SER one. I thought the SER was genuinely multi-messaged, whereas I think this is unambiguous. And I think we need to be consistent in the way we're doing this. Either we're going to be strict constructionists or we're not going to be strict constructionists, or at least there's got to be some reason why we would be strict constructionists in one situation and not strict constructionists in another. And as I said, I agree with withholding the money as a matter of public policy, but I don't see the statutory authority to do it. I don't even see, I thought I missed this one that you just read to me, Catherine. I thought maybe somehow we were doing it under the notice to commission to intent to discontinue. And even that, I don't quite know where we would have derived the authority. But maybe there's sort of a compromise here if you all are saying what really matters to you in the big picture is not having the money get scooped. There is a process under 149.03 where if you give us a notice of discontinuance, that we do have the option, after having a public hearing, to put that money into escrow, which would accomplish the objective you're saying is your objective. It's a little bit less egregious assertion of administrative authority than simply, writing a reg that seems to completely go contrary to that. But it might be a middle ground. Does that accomplish your objective?
I'm not sure it accomplishes mine, Mr. Chairman. I hadn't contemplated it yet. It may accomplish the horseman's objective of protecting the funds and having them in an interest-bearing escrow account, but I'd have to revisit that as it relates to Suffolk Downs' particular interest.
Right, and just to be clear, as you referred to the fact that you had some interest in your legislation that's similar to ours. It's quite different in the sense that your legislation is designed to name SSR, I guess, as an entitled party for an extended period of time, whereas ours is to have that authority be in the commission.
We don't have legislation yet. I mean, we have language.
Well, you have an MOU.
Yeah, right, exactly. So we've got,
which says that's what you're going to try to do in the legislature.
Yeah, we in the same way that the gaming licenses are for 15 years, so that the Commonwealth could ensure the investment and reassure the people making the investment that they would have the license for a period of time where they might earn a return on their investment. we are seeking similar, right? We would, if we're going to continue to make an investment, and a capital investment in a new facility in the Commonwealth, we'd like to know that we have the license for a period of, at least 8 or 10 years, so that we can amortize the investment over that time with some confidence. Now, we didn't, we're not, yeah.
I get that, and, but I would, from our standpoint, and what we have suggested is that amending our legislation to say a license award is for X period of time is something that I, for one, would think about. The other commissioners, would have their own opinion. The issue is whether or not the legislation should determine who will be the holder of that license. I understand that's why it's in your interest to do that, and more power to you. But that's not what we're recommending at all. We think it's better if it turns out there really are two groups that really do have a fighting chance of saving thoroughbred racing. Our belief is that we're better to have competition and let us decide which of the two should get it. But so you're saying that using the 149.03, which is an escrow account set up by us, which would accomplish the protecting the funds purpose, were we to do it, it would be, you think, acceptable to the horsemen, but you'd have to think about whether it's acceptable to you.
I think we'd have to look at the various triggers and see what the consequences of those declarations might be beyond triggering the escrow ability. But just one more thought. The commission wrote the regulation to establish those triggers for unforeseen circumstances, or at least circumstances not fully contemplated by the statute. If there is a circumstance that exists that is slightly different than those particular triggers, but is nevertheless not contemplated by the statute, at least well enough in your view, why not amend the regulation to add another trigger, or find another way to exercise the authority that the commission's decided it has to make escrow
And
agreements?
why not do that in, let's say, July, when the current legislation is either addressed or dies or renewed?
Because the racing, future of the racing statutes isn't the only thing that's going to be on the legislature's agenda between now and the end of the session. In July, there's going to be all these other desires and hopes and potential raids on the fund.
Yeah, and that would be their prerogative.
I mean, the whole point of the regulation is to preserve and escrow the funds. That's the idea behind it, that if there's a discontinuation of thoroughbred racing, we'll preserve the funds. I don't think you need to amend the regulation. I think the commission, if it believes it has the plenary authority, can still just deposit the funds into escrow. I believe they have to distribute it on a weekly basis into the purse account. But if the commission's taking a view that they have some discretion there, which I don't agree with, I think they then have the discretion at least to create an escrow fund at the commission level and at least deposit those funds, because at that point, then the thoroughbred horsemen will be able to accrue interest on those funds and not face the legislative risk. I mean, that's what happens with the harness people. There's nothing in the statute that mentions days. I don't know why 150 days is better than 6 days in terms of, there's nothing in the statute that references days. It seems capricious. There's nothing in the statute that defines the number of days you have to run before the commission has to make those weekly deposits.
There is a number of days in the racing statute that says how many days you have to run, and that's what the legislature was basing this Racehorse Development Fund on. Legislation requires that everyone run 100 days if they want to simulcast. I believe both the harness and the thoroughbred horsemen want to simulcast. The legislature has given them a lower amount of days up until about 15 when they went to the 1 in 50. So yeah, I mean, there is a contemplation of a number of days. I would also point out to the commission that there are other parts, at least one that I'm aware of, in 128A, where there is a required payment, but we can no longer make that payment because the need and the use does not exist, and we don't make that payment. So, when things change in a statute, in the environment that a statute's created in changes, then there are times when you have to do something different. And so just because the statute says you have to make the payment, if the reality is not there, and this is only for purse money, the commission understands too that there is no other use that we can approve it for besides purse money. We can't approve it for operational uses. We can't approve it for capital uses until the legislature makes up their mind to do something different.
Absolutely.
We have
which we've been
some operational expenses.
The operational expenses, and we've had this conversation with the horsemen before, the operational expenses are to come out of the takeouts from simulcast and premium monies. It goes through the same purse account, but there was a particular amendment that the industry asked the legislature to make, And they amended the language that pertained to simulcasting and for premium accounts to use those purse monies for operational and administrative purposes.
Yeah, I think that's the key. Reading the statute the way they read it, and I don't blame them for doing that. Construction is, well, the way you're reading it, yeah, ignores the reality out there that there could be, that first of all, there's a pending legislation that we've submitted now for a few years, which was on schedule, like the statute envisioned, because it itself, they themselves envisioned that they needed to fix it because the landscape was going to change. So that's it. It also ignores the reality that there may be other investors out there with however more realistic or less realistic plans, but they also need some kind of legislative fix that can give an investor, a potential investor, certainty. I, at a minimum, would say before we do anything on this, simply ask the comptroller on whether a move like this, and explain, and they're good at reading statute, would be even appropriate. I believe it's not appropriate, but they could certainly weigh in.
Yeah.
I think it's either it ranges between overly cute and simply irresponsible, but they could give us a lot more guidance when it came to dispersing something of this magnitude at this particular time.
Well, that's consistent with where I'm sort of leaning. Commissioner Stebbins, before I say anything, do you want to?
No, I think that's a fair suggestion, comptroller.
So we would hold on this request until we have an answer? Is that what you're
From the
saying? And then
comptroller,
we'd come back and
Mhm.
okay.
They could easily opine, as in, you're within your purview, and we could come back to this discussion, or that would be inappropriate for whatever reason that I am not articulating well here. They have a lot more authority to do.
I think that's a good suggestion. I was going to suggest that we put this off. We also, we only have 4 members now. A 5th is coming. We've always been pretty careful not to make controversial decisions when we don't have a full complement, even though this person doesn't even know what she's about to get into. Welcome, Eileen. But also, I didn't, until this morning, really understand the legal issues, having really gone through the CMR closely. So I was going to, and I think we can ask, I don't know that what the comptroller says is dispositive particularly, but it's an important piece of information. So I suggest that we do not make a decision on this today, and we put it off until our next meeting. I would like a little more attention to the legal issues, and this issue we wrestle with all the time, which is our administrative authority under these kinds of circumstances. And we'll do the comptroller question, and if anybody else wants to weigh in on any other, you see the issues that we're trying to wrestle with here. So we'll put this off for a couple weeks. Okay. You got another one, right?
Yep, got a couple more. Item B is Suffolk's request to amend their racing dates. Originally, they were going to start in July, and now they'd like to start on June 9th and 10th, which is Belmont weekend. It should get a lot of good attention and publicity, a lot of interest. Our racing staff has no issue covering that, and I think it's early enough in the season that the racing personnel and horsemen should have no trouble meeting that either. And that June 9th and 10th would replace their dates that they had in September.
Straightforward requests. Our racing director her staff can cover it, because I know they do double duty when you have racing in 2 locations. So I see no reason why we don't approve that request.
You've had some pretty good success with your September dates. Is there any chance September dates could be added back in?
There is a chance, although when we looked at last year, that was the weakest of the 3 festival weekends, and so that's one of the reasons we thought.
Competing with the NFL?
It gets, and it's also just a time of the year that there aren't as many people around, given Labor Day weekend and things like that. So if we were to come back to you to request additional dates for the fall, I don't think it would be Labor Day weekend, but it may be later in the season.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the request of Suffolk Downs to amend their racing dates by replacing September 1st and 2nd with June 9th and 10th, 2018.
Second.
Second by Mr. Stebbins. Commissioner Stebbins, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you have one more, Director Lightfound.
Yes, our next issue is the Massachusetts Thoroughbred Breeders Association request for dates at Finger Lakes. In 2015, they got legislation changed. Part of the breeders' regulations are covered in the agriculture section, Chapter 128, and then obviously some of it falls under us. So they got the agriculture regulation 128 changed to allow racing at a licensed track approved by the commission. And that's important wording. It doesn't say a track licensed by the Gaming Commission. So, and that was one of the comments that in the letters we got was saying that it had to be a track in Massachusetts. Our interpretation for the last several years has been that that wording allows it to be out of state to have these races. You have in front of you the letters from the Mass Thoroughbred Association asking for it. There were numerous comments about it that you have in your packet as well, with different comments about it. And then we have another letter from the breeders and a letter from Bob Scarano with different opinions. Some of the main concerns were the cost of shipping to Finger Lakes. So if you're not stabled at Finger Lakes, it can be fairly expensive to ship a horse there to race. The Mass Thoroughbred Association will pay for shipping. That doesn't cover all your expenses, obviously. The trainer or groom going up with the horse would still have to have a place to live and things like that.
So the breeders are paying this out of?
Right, out of
Oh,
their
I
funds.
thought it was Finger Lakes, okay.
No. The workman's comp has been an issue in the past. It was expensive up there. My understanding is that at Finger Lakes in general, they have changed it. So the Horsemen's Association at Finger Lakes is paying for workman's comp out of their funds. And from what I understand, for the mass breeders won't have to pay for workman's comp. So that takes a big chunk of payment. You know, if you were just running up there for one race, you had to come up with $1,500 or whatever just for workman's comp for that. Plus, you know, another $800 to ship, whatever. As far as safety goes, those concerns were raised. They are a NTRA accredited racetrack, which Suffolk Downs has been for several, for years now, actually. I did speak to their veterinarian up there, who's been up at Finger Lakes for 7 years at least, and he said last year happened to be their safest year since he's been up there. Individual horses may have issues. I heard, about some concerns that people had when they took their horses up there, but overall, I don't see a problem with their safety record. There is frustration when you read the letters from some of the people opposed to the races up there that their horses that they're racing at other tracks are being claimed and then taken up to Finger Lakes and racing there for the bigger purses. And it's legal to claim a horse. If you put your horse in the claiming race, and it gets claimed, it gets claimed. If people have concerns that there's something fishy going on with the claiming, if they feel somebody's claiming a horse for somebody else or anything like that, they should go to the stewards in the individual state that horse was claimed out of, and they can launch an investigation. We had one, not dealing with the breeders, but just in general, we had one of those at Suffolk this year. The stewards looked into it and decided the claim wasn't valid. So there is a way of going and investigating claims like that. So those are some of the issues that have been brought up. It is a controversial issue. I've asked the board to, again, look at the different jurisdictions and what they're doing. Virginia has had a plan that seems to be working pretty well there. They don't have the exact same circumstances as we do, so not everything will work. But
what do you mean Virginia has?
They don't have any a live racing track in Virginia right now, but they do have a breeders program. And those horses run at Laurel.
And there's public money that goes to pay for the purses and those?
I think there is. I'm not sure how the Breeders' Fund is funded. But they do have a breeders fund that's, you know, collecting this money, and it's being used to fund these races. Obviously, this is not an ideal situation, and we've said that from the beginning, from the first time that these races were approved at Finger Lakes. You know, they're not being raced in Massachusetts. And obviously, the best scenario is that we get a racetrack here where the thoroughbreds can race in state, and then we don't have to have this issue of, are they going up to Finger Lakes or are they racing somewhere else? And that. Also, I've asked the Breeders Association to look into the possibility of increasing their bonuses so that right now, wherever the horses run, they can get some bonus money if they're a mass bred. What Virginia has done is they've raised their bonuses so that that's a little more rewarding, and so you don't necessarily have to go to a Finger Lakes to race. Wherever you are, you can get some money. So,
Comments?
Did we? The statute talks about the breeding program to go to breeding, and when did we first start funding purses? Was that a regulation or was that in statute?
Well, so this again is much like Chapter 128A. There was always money that came from takeout that went to the breeders, and that's under 128A and 128C. When the Racehorse Development Fund was created under the Gaming Act, it created an additional source of money that goes to the breeders. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we don't regulate that program. The Department of Agriculture regulates that program. So they set the qualifications that you have to meet to be deemed to be a mass bred. They are also the ones who determine what the breeders can use their money for. So we are essentially part of the funding mechanism, but we don't control that program. There's been changes to the breeders section in 128 over time, as the different stakeholders have asked. This particular section gives the commission the ability to approve races, but that's about all the commission has the authority to approve. And then we make our payments through the Racehorse Development Fund like that fund requires. So we have started through the Racehorse Development Fund since that was created, but there has always been funding that went to the breeders under other provisions of 128A.
And they went for races,
And
purses?
they went for purses and bonuses. They have two different sections. One is for a bonus that Dr. Lightbaum just talked about, where you can race anywhere, and the breeders can add a bonus for the horse that wins if it's a mass-bred horse. And then there's separate purse money, and the breeders can actually fund purses out of their money as well. The other piece is they have a restriction on the percentage of it that they can use for marketing, and that has changed too. It was, I think, at 8%, now it's at 12%. So that's all in the agriculture statute.
But the way that the breeders are able to use the monies is by racing and winning races.
Predominantly, yes, that's right.
Yes.
So what we did was offer a greater opportunity for them to race, so that's the only way they can get the monies that have been set aside for them.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't enough opportunity here. We allowed them to go elsewhere. The other thing I thought was important here is, there are folks that aren't happy with this program, but the leadership has made this request. They feel like it's a valid opportunity, and the members can always vote no members in if they don't agree with their leadership. So I think that we really should. I personally do value the word of the leadership, because they're representing as many members as they can, or all of their members, but not everyone agrees with their decisions. And I do appreciate the fact that many of the comments were about shipping and workers' comp, and that those two obstacles have been taken off the board here. They are no longer the obstacles to running and having an opportunity at the Finger Lakes.
Oh, they're not? They're no longer, but they used to?
Well, that's been changed since all these comments were made. So they're trying to address their members'
The Finger Lakes
concerns.
thing took place several months ago. That hit the trade news that they were the horsemen there had worked their own deal out, among their horsemen's association on the workman's comp.
I didn't quite get that timing.
Mm-hmm.
So what about, is there What about the notion that too few people are benefiting from these because of proximity or shipping costs or stable? With these changes, could that change?
Well, hopefully, and I don't know, I mean, I'd love to know how many different owners are benefiting from the Finger Lakes program. Do we have an answer to that?
I have Greg Rose and Kathleen Reagan are here today. George couldn't be here, so.
An introduction?
All right. My name is Kathleen Reagan. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm a lawyer that does a lot of equine law, and I got voted onto the board last year. I was on the board, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and then I got re-voted on. So I'm part of that group that is attempting to respond to the concerns of the horsemen that you guys are just talking about. So my observation about the numbers of trainers and owners are that there's many single owner racehorses that benefit, and there are multiple multi-horse owners that benefit. And the nice thing about Finger Lakes is that its proximity lends itself to the money. I know you guys expressed a concern that the money benefit Massachusetts owners and breeders. The proximity directly affects that. You can drive in a day. You can ship in, ship out. It's close. So one of the concerns about some of the other racetracks is, I know that, for example, in Delaware, they tried to fund a race, and they were unable to staff it with enough horses to have Delaware Park make it a race. So the further away you go, the harder it is. So I really think that with the changes that have been made, we are benefiting the maximum amount of Massachusetts owners and breeders. And the program is attractive. This new innovation with Finger Lakes is one of the most innovative programs, and it really does benefit Massachusetts farms. So.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, I would echo Commissioner Cameron. I mean, I think this is another example as to how creative we're trying to be to cobble together opportunities for the thoroughbred industry and in the breeders. But I would like to see a little bit more of a breakdown at some point. It says, example, 25 races at Finger Lakes. 21 of these were won by horses owned by Massachusetts residents. It would be great, without being name specific, to kind of get a breakdown as to
numbers
how
of
many
horses.
breeders have benefited.
This is Greg Rose. He's also on the board.
Commissioners, we do indeed will be able to get you a breakdown of the owners, trainers, and horses. The one thing I'd like to point out is that people join the organization as the year goes on. We have a proviso that if you want to run for the board, you must become a member by the 1st of March. If you want to vote in the election, which is held in October, you can sign up all the way up to the 1st of September. So quite a lot of people actually do join the organization once the races are started. So we can't, at the moment, I believe we have about 30 members, and that may more than double by the time September rolls around. We had about 66 members last year, approximately.
How much does membership cost?
If you are a first-time member, or you are it's $100. If you get in by March 1st, it's also $100. If you're an old member that procrastinates, it's $150.
That would be me.
What we're looking at is the spring schedule, and then there's reference to obviously the dates we've talked about at Suffolk. Are you anticipating additional racing at Finger Lakes this year, or is this kind of the body of it?
So at this point, we don't have any additional that I'm aware of.
No.
This is something that is a recurring theme in working with the Breeders Organization, we have to sign contracts at the beginning of the year, early in the year, and the preparations have to be made, well before the racing days.
Right.
You just can't, it's nearly impossible to create a race later on. I know Suffolk Downs appreciates the opportunity to do that at the very end of the season, but in the middle of the season, it's very hard.
Okay.
For all kinds of practical reasons.
I too would basically echo Commissioner Cameron's. I mean, there were 12 people who wrote into us objecting to this program, and I want to tell them all that we all read their emails, and we're actually concerned, and we're very pleased to hear that a number of the issues raised, the financial issues like the shipping and the workman's comp, were addressed. But I agree with Commissioner Cameron. At the end of the day, it sounds like either members or prospective members who disagree with policy decisions that are being made by their board, and it's, unless there were some evidence of fraud or some kind of corruption, which there is not, this is an issue for the breeders to deal with themselves, amongst themselves, and if they want different policies out of their leadership, they ought to get different leadership. But it's not our judgment to second guess the decisions made by the elected leadership of the organization. So I'm in the same place.
We have some lively meetings. I can.
So do we.
We do, we indeed.
So, Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the request of the Massachusetts Thoroughbred Breeders Association.
We do have a position, I'm sorry, Ms. Cameron, but we do have a position
Why don't you come forward and give us your name?
Hi, my name's Attorney Robert Scarano. I am an attorney, and I was retained by one of the largest breeders here in Massachusetts, Adele Salim. We submitted a correspondence to the commission relevant to two issues. The first issue is we believe that it's in excess of this statute. And while I believe you have certainly discretion, the statute allowed stake races. That has become the big issue when it looks to this statute, 128, and specifically G. It was for stake races. What's happening is there are racing restricted races. What occurs in a restricted race is it's restricted to mass breds, but the purse amount is set so high that the horses are not running for their comparable value. Therefore, they're being protected by certain owners, breeders, and trainers. They're asking you to approve these races in New York based on what is a protection by high purses against low-value horses. That prevents a legitimate claiming process, and that was one of our main concerns. And while it's certainly an issue for New York, and it's certainly an issue for the breeders, it's certainly an issue for this board, because you are approving these races. Thus, the stigma that other folks see that there's protectionism going on with these horses. They cannot be claimed. No one is going to claim a $5,000 horse out of any of these races for $35,000, $25,000, $20,000. They simply are going to stay in New York, race in New York, and race for these purses, never coming back to Massachusetts for the purpose of this statute, which was to encourage breeding. They don't come back. They're not coming back. And why would you? If you can stay in New York and earn $25,000 on a purse, why would you come back to Massachusetts? And the money does not come back to Massachusetts, not 1 cent comes back to support the program here. If you look at the purpose of 128, and it's specifically G, it's for breeding. There is no breeding occurring in Massachusetts, certainly not emanating from New York.
We'll get to you in a minute.
Yeah.
Can I follow up on one thing? Isn't that what you described, Mr. Scarano, the amount of purses, the amount of money that is going towards those purses? If those purses were less, couldn't there still be some claiming?
I believe you're right. There would be claiming going on, which is the backbone of this industry.
Yep.
But the other issue is that the statute says stakes. It was never intended to run restricted racing. Restricted racing breeds a different element at tracks, and you're approving that element. I agree with you, Commissioner. Lowered purses would encourage claiming at that level, but the issue is that the statute allowed stake races, and for them to put the purse up for stake races, there's no problem with that because that invites open company. People are coming to race for that purse, and guess what? There'll be horses in there worth $35,000. There'll be horses that are worth $15,000 trying to win that purse. But right now, what's going on in restricted racing, and that's what you're allowing, and that's what we're opposed to.
But isn't the restriction, help me understand the restriction, is to mass bred?
Correct.
Right, the restriction is you have to be a Massachusetts bred horse.
That's
So
correct.
that the benefit can go to the mass breeders. What's wrong in concept with that restriction, or are there others?
There's nothing wrong with the concept of running restricted races for the value of the horses. But when you run restricted races for an increased purse amount, you are preventing a legitimate claim. People have lost their horses, as you have read. They can't get them back because they're not going to spend $35,000 to reclaim them. This is protectionism. That's what restricted racing is doing in New York. That is what we are opposed to.
Has your client expressed his views to the board?
Mr. Salim is here, and he did send in a letter. He did coordinate some of the letters that came to you. Certainly, they raised the logistic issues for racing at one single track, getting there, leaving their horses to go 8 hours. It isn't as convenient as my sister.
He
had
does have the ability to run for the board and or get others to run
This
for
is
the board.
not, this is not a board issue, and this is an issue where the commission is approving races that is acting as a protection for people running in another state by using Massachusetts money. That's the issue.
Are you familiar with this argument? And
I'm familiar with the argument, yes. I mean, I guess what I would say is this. You're approving races to be run out of state, as the statute says, at a licensed pari-mutuel facility. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as a commission, you don't have any involvement or authority over how races are written in Massachusetts. So you would not have any authority over how races are written in New York. All you're approving is they can run these races out of state, and they use the money that comes from us for the purses. I understand the argument. It seems to me this is an argument about how these races are written. As Dr. Lightbaum pointed out, that's a question for the track in New York, and it's a question for maybe for the Department of Agriculture here. If you're talking about the breeding program, that's a question for them. The other thing we didn't talk about earlier is that the Department of Agriculture specifically has the ability to audit the thoroughbred group and what they do with their money. So, you know, I think between the Department of Agriculture, the stewards in New York,
it's actually the
how you have to-
it's the state auditor who can audit.
yeah, they can audit it. So, I mean, I think these are questions that really aren't for the commission. I mean, I think they're, how races are written, you wouldn't opine on that here in Massachusetts, never mind New York. That's for the track in New York, for these folks to take up with their board, for the Department of Agriculture to weigh in if they have concerns about that under the breeding program. So.
And this is an accredited track.
Yeah.
What about the notion of the stakes versus the restricted that Mr. Scarano makes?
I'll let Dr. Lightbaum speak to that. I mean, what we're looking at are purses for races for mass breds. That's what you've always been trying to encourage because there isn't enough of that here in the Commonwealth. But I think you can speak maybe to the.
Yeah, maybe I'm missing something here because if it was a stake race, it would also have a really big purse. So I'm not sure either way, the race at Finger Lakes would have a much bigger purse than what those horses would normally race for. So I'm not sure I'm understanding.
I could probably make the distinction. Stakes races are an open company. All mass breds from all over the country can come to Finger Lakes and race for that purse. And there could be a legitimate claim out of the race. You would have horses ranging from the value of the purse, $35,000, $15,000, $20,000. You bring the best of the best to race for that purse. That's not happening at Finger Lakes. That's what the statute allows. Stakes races. That's what it mentions. Stakes races. This change, an amendment, relates to purses and prizes. It has nothing to do with the type of races. You are approving stakes races. We feel that by the board approving stake races, you are sanctioning what's going on in New York by reducing legitimate claims. People can't get their horses back. They ran them in races. They lost them in races of comparable value. They're being taken, brought to New York, and protected by high purses that don't allow anyone to claim them back. As a matter of fact, I bet you there hasn't been one claim out of any restricted race in New York. I'm almost guarantee you there hasn't been a claim because no one will pay $35,000, $25,000, or even $20,000 for a $5,000 horse. It's simply not going to happen. The Massachusetts Gaming Commission is approving races. I understand your point. Change the board, vote them off, get them out. Unfortunately, when you approve these races and they're not just pure stake races, you're allowing restricted races to go forward. They write the conditions for themselves. That's what they get to do because they are the board.
Well, and that was another issue was that supposedly this year the racing office is going to write the races, not the racing board. And I agree with that. At every track, it's the racing office, the racing secretary. Obviously, they're going to look at the horse population there, and it's going to probably be similar to what it's been in the past. And you might see some of the same races, basically. But
Okay,
they are getting.
I think we understand this. We got your
I'm
point,
just going
sir.
to wind it up then quickly with one closing statement. I do not think that you should approve racing in Finger Lakes, especially restricted racing. If you are going to approve any racing, you should allow the statute to speak. It speaks to stakes races. That allows open company to come up there and compete.
You've
And
made that
Thank you very
point.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anything in closing?
Yeah, I would just say that each one of these points were covered in the letter that the board directed to the commission. So with reference to the statement just made by the attorney, if you would just reread that letter, the specific allegations were addressed in that letter.
I did see that where
Yeah.
it went point by point there.
Point by point, we tried really hard to address it specifically. The other thing I would point out.
Can I go to that? Just
Yeah, why don't you just quickly give us the points? That might be helpful.
I don't have it.
Okay.
If you find the second
letter.
document with the green circle on the top, that's the
Yes.
easiest way to find it.
I'm sorry, I was upstairs in the middle of the hearing. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I see it. Mhm.
Okay, so if you turn to the next.
Page 2.
Yeah, page 2, we start with restricted races.
Yeah.
Restricted race findings, why Finger Lakes.
Mhm.
Restricted races at other racetracks, bonus awards. And the last page addresses the specifics of the claiming statements made by the attorney.
Do you have anything else to add to that?
I don't.
Yeah, I would just say that the statement made that there's no breeding going on in Massachusetts is simply not true. There is breeding. The Jockey Club and the Department of Agriculture regulate, when the foals show up, and they don't. It's not required that they be registered until X days. So the fact that they're not on our website doesn't mean they're not there.
Right. Very often, some breeders will actually wait as long as the horse is over a year old before they will actually register them.
So there are stallions, there are mares being bred. And I would say that George Brown, whom you all know, would be here, and he's got an active farm, as you all know, except that he fell and he's fallen. He fell and he's okay, right?
He's okay, but he's going to take a while.
Okay, send them our best.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway.
You know, I reiterate my point that the board, we've heard, sir, that the board is trying to act on behalf of their membership, as many of them as possible, and people have a right and a chance to change the board if they don't agree with the board's recommendations to us. I think the letter lays that out, and I again start my motion that that we approve the request of the Massachusetts Thoroughbred Breeders Association to run 5 restricted mass bred races at the Finger Lakes Racecourse in New York.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion?
Ultimately, I think I'm going to vote in favor of this, but is there anything from the Department of Agriculture that we could get towards this, what seems to be a market versus amount of money coming in? Anything they could help us in this regard?
On the claiming,
On the claiming, that
this, Alex is right, Dr. Lightbaum is right. It has come up in Massachusetts at our tracks, both tracks actually. And it's generally up to the judges and stewards to rule on whether a claim was appropriate and whether it was appropriately made. So, I mean, I don't know what the Department of Agriculture would have. I know in Massachusetts, those things come up through the track level to the judges and stewards. And then if they get appealed, they go to our hearing officer and ultimately up to you as the commission. So, I mean, we can ask the Department of Agriculture. We can, I guess, also ask Finger Lakes too.
The
issue with the
horseman was-
restricted races is what they do is they write them so that the horses who are winning the stake races at Suffolk, the best horses, aren't eligible for the races at Finger Lakes. And so
Right.
that's where the upset arises. Those people who have the best horses can't, race at Finger Lakes, so they're not getting that money. The board's idea in the past was to try to spread the money out. So it's kind of an opposing thing. If you take the money from the best horses and give it to the horses that are running at Finger Lakes to spread the money out to encourage everybody to breed, then the best horses aren't getting the kind of money they would. And, in the past, we had horses that were dominant, and basically won almost all the money in a certain year. And that money just went to, those owners. And so it's a different, you're trying to balance different factors out.
Yeah, and the thing is, the best horses that would sweep under a circumstance such as what is being argued, those horses all have the ability to win open races that are unrestricted.
Anywhere in the country.
Anywhere in the country.
Including
I mean,
Finger
you
Lakes.
heard the reverse argument made by the gentleman, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that fair in the nature, in the spirit of the agricultural side as a breeder? Shouldn't I want my mass thoroughbred to be able to maybe run the Kentucky Derby or in the heart? Wouldn't that bring some pride in?
But excuse me, sir, I appreciate your
Thank you
action
for
on
your-
this, but we've got, you're talking now about an issue that the breeders have to figure out. What's fair, wouldn't you like? Those are questions for the breeders to figure out. As best our informed minds can see, these are, the kinds of issues you're raising are to be worked out amongst you guys, not amongst us. So.
We have a motion. We have a second.
No. We have a
Oh,
second.
we're in the middle of a
We gave
motion.
it a second.
Yep. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You guys have it unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
You can send us your comment.
Oh,
Okay.
If I could just say one quick thing, as you probably know, Doug O'Donnell has taken a position with the financial department. So I just wanted to thank him for his many years of service
good.
to the racing division.
Thank you.
Will he continue in some capacity with racing, or is
Well,
that?
a lot of the finance team helps out the racing division a lot, and certainly while we look to fill his position, and then once we get somebody on board, he's been, willing to help train them and everything.
All right, the last item is any words of wisdom from the commissioners.
Just two quick notes. I think, not sure whether the commission is aware, but after we approved $65,000 for scholarships for the gaming school last week, Springfield Technical Community College and Holyoke Community College each stepped forward with $25,000 each of their own to leverage the money. So we are at do my math right, $115,000 now available for
Wow.
scholarships to the gaming school.
I was not aware. That's very good news. Thank you.
And other good news was I was excited to see, as a local homegrown guy, the marketing agreement between MGM and the Basketball Hall of Fame that came out this week as well.
Terrific, great.
Mm.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.